The Hound of the Baskerville family, Viker van Baskerville, seemed to be trapped somewhere. Two frightening scars marked his face, one running from his left eye down to the corner of his mouth, and another horizontal cut across his face. True to his name, he served the family and his father faithfully. It turned out he wasn't actually locked away. Instead, he was chained. His head was fixed to a wooden plank, flanked by two tall posts. Above him, parallel to the wood, was a sharp blade secured by thin steel wire. Standing on either side of the posts were two men facing him, both holding sabers, a type of sword used in fencing. The reason he found himself in this predicament was due to false accusations of colluding with demons, leading to a death sentence. As he stood before the guillotine, images of his family members flooded his mind. He vowed, if I can live again, once I sink my teeth into my prey, I will never live the life of a hound again. Breaking free from his thoughts, he realized he truly felt like a hound. His mouth bared in a terrifying snarl, yet tears of blood streamed from his eyes as if he were mourning for himself. The blood tears flowed down in turns, but when they hit the ground, the space in front of him suddenly transformed. He was surprised to find himself in a room that felt both familiar and strange. It was as if he was lying in a wooden crib, surrounded by the sounds of other crying babies. He opened his eyes wide in astonishment. Where am I? It turned out he had gone from being a strong, rugged man with terrifying scars to being a baby in a crib. Not a wooden frame at all. His body felt stiff and his eyes widened in bewilderment as he thought to himself, my body feels heavy and it's so noisy around me. No way. Is this hell? Outside the room, he could see it was the estate of the Baskerville family with houses built in European architectural style. From outside, he could clearly hear the agonizing cries of the babies gathered in a large room. Amidst the crying, a displeased voice suddenly cut through the noise. Commoners! That voice belonged to Hugo of Baskerville, the head of the Baskerville family. In the room, besides the old man and the children, there were two women who seemed to be caretakers for the kids here. The old man walked out of the room with his hands in his pockets and said to the two women, there aren't any special children here. I think it's just a bunch of throwaways. But as he walked past the cradle where I was, he suddenly stopped, surprised. He let out a sigh and quietly glanced at me for a moment. Then he ordered the two women, this throwaway seems quieter. Take this child to the cradle of sword. I looked at him, and when I heard his words, my eyes widened. In my mind flashed the realization, the main culprit who accused and killed me, Hugo of Baskerville. Confused, I raised my hand to look at it. I was astonished to see my large, rough hand had transformed into a tiny, smooth, white hand like that of a baby. And I thought, a descendant of Hugo is me? I, Viker van Baskerville, have now returned as a child. In the past, I lived like a hunting dog, a discarded child. I trained in the worst conditions. A dog has to do whatever it takes to complete missions like assassination, reconnaissance, ambush, and intimidation. A dog does all the dirty work to help the Baskerville clan become one of the 7 major families. The reason for my loyalty is simple. I wanted to be recognized by the clan and by Hugo. 10 years after the gate to the demon realm opened, the battle against the demon race ended with humanity's victory. The reward given to the dog who dedicated everything to the clan was betrayal. The reason for my execution was that this hunting dog knew too much. In the form of a child, I raised my tiny hand, clenched it tightly, vowing not to live a life like that again. Then I rolled back and forth in the crib, silently screaming inside. I want revenge right now, I thought, but with this new warm body, I can't do anything. When I turned over, my face suddenly appeared fearsome. I gripped the bed sheets tightly, thinking that being taken to the cradle of sword was an opportunity to gain strength. Now, what I need is to become stronger. The scene shifts to a place he just thought of, the cradle of sword, where the children born into the Baskerville family must face tough challenges and countless dangers. Only by overcoming these perilous trials can they be accepted by the Baskerville clan. The atmosphere at the cradle of sword is eerie. Thousands of swords stand in the ground, each marked with evidence of battles fought, bloodstains and scratches that testify to the brutality of the struggles that took place there. Each child born into the Baskerville family must confront this place all at once. The children are tossed into a labyrinth of swords, and once they navigate through it, they must reach the river Styx to test their abilities. The river Styx is a legendary river that can turn a child's body into steel. However, only a few children can endure that transformation. To reach the river Styx, one must first survive the thousands of sword blades. He finds himself currently in the first trial. His body is covered in blood, with wounds from cuts made by the swords. Yet his gaze is determined and he feels no pain. Gripping the sword before him tightly, he thinks, in my past life, I failed against my siblings and couldn't reach my goal. This time will be different. The people present there witnessed him diving headfirst into a challenge. They all gasped when they saw him navigate the maze of swords. His body was covered in wounds and blood, yet he didn't shed a single tear. Hugo Le Baskerville was among the crowd, staring at him intently. Suddenly, they were jolted by a loud splash. He had jumped into the river Styx, leaving those on the shore in shock. As he leaped, he thought to himself, I will claim as many blessings from the river Styx as I can. As he sank into the water, he noticed his wounds and imagined the water seeping through his skin and bones, through the cuts, not realizing the power it held. He covered his nose and mouth with his hands, his face contorted in discomfort from not being able to breathe. He was determined to hold his breath as long as he could, no matter how painful it would be. He had to endure. On the bank, two people standing in front of Hugo Le Baskerville shouted in worry, Young master, you have to get out. You'll drown if you stay in the water any longer. We must pull you out. Hugo Le Baskerville stood there, his eyes glowing red. His terrifying face broke into a chilling laugh. Ha ha ha. Stopping his laughter, he turned to speak to someone standing behind him. It was John Barrymore, the head butler of the Baskerville family. Hugo asked, Barrymore, how long has that kid been in the river? Barrymore replied, It's been 7 minutes, sir. Upon hearing this, Hugo said, 7 minutes? He's probably dead by now. One of the two men earlier shouted, calling for him, and nervously said, Master. Hugo then approached the riverbank, looked down, and called out, Son, you can come out now. The boy underwater was still struggling against drowning. Upon hearing Hugo's voice, he thought, You think I would give up that easily? Instead of surfacing, he opened his mouth to gulp down water, determined to absorb every last drop. But this act caused him to choke. His eyes glazed over, and slowly, he sank deeper to the bottom of the lake. His body had stiffened, but his mind still held onto the thought that he had to endure. Just when he thought he would drown in that river, a hand gripped his leg and pulled him out of the water. It was the hand of Hugo Le Baskerville. The old man held his leg up and said, Look at this little one. The waters of the river Styx aren't enough. He wants to drink more. He even has teeth now. Still gripping his leg, the old man asked the steward, What's this child's name? The steward replied, His name is Viker van Baskerville. With his frightening face, the old man sneered and repeated Viker's name. Then he happily said, Looks like I've got a decent offspring here. It turned out he was still conscious, and hearing the old man say this filled his mind with a strange joy at being connected to Hugo. He, in the form of a hunting dog, opened his mouth wide, revealing sharp teeth as he thought, Right now, I need time to sharpen my fangs, and when the moment comes, I'll crush your head. He had the body of a child, but the soul of an adult from a past life. Inside and out, it blended as one, teeth clenched and eyes glowing with a terrifying red light. I will ensure that the Baskerville clan disappears from history by my own hand, Viker van Baskerville told himself, the bastard child of Hugo Le Baskerville. At 8 years old, he possessed a talent that deserved to be called genius, yet in his family it was merely seen as acceptable. By the age of 20, he was entrusted with tasks like assassination, espionage, and taking down adversaries. At 29, he began to lag behind the extraordinary talents of others and was approaching the limits of his swordsmanship skills. When he turned 30, the gateway to the demon realm opened, marking the beginning of an invasion by demons. By 35, he had survived an era of destruction and had killed countless demons, reaching the age of 39. After the long war finally ended with humanity's victory, and upon turning 40, he received an award for his loyalty, akin to that of a hunting dog. These rewards came at the cost of severing heads from their bodies, with slander following slander. Eventually, his own head would also find its place on the guillotine. The scene shifts to him. At this moment, he slowly opens his eyes, looks around, and thinks, This place is a nursery? That means I succeeded in absorbing the waters of the Styx. He immediately rolls over, his expression serious as he thinks, With this, I'll have a better starting point than before. Suddenly, a woman's voice rings out. She is holding a box and says, Oh my God, this is just outrageous. Why would she have me put this in the cradle of the young master? He is surprised by her voice and what she says. He thinks, The mistress? The woman places the box in his cradle before turning to leave the room. He looks at the box she placed in the cradle and wonders, Why would someone go out of their way to give a gift to a bastard like me? After staring at the box for a while, he notices something moving inside. Then the lid slowly opens and 2 snakes crawl out. He was startled and fell back, thinking, Is this really Bloody Number? As he thought this, the 2 snakes stared at him with their eerie eyes. One of them opened its mouth, drooling, revealing long, sharp fangs aimed at him. Once the surprise wore off, he knelt, bracing himself with one leg, and stared back at the 2 snakes with a serious expression. He thought, There's no way. These rare beasts are just here to assassinate me. Not many people in Baskerville held such a title as that woman. She must be trying to lessen the competition for her own child. The 2 snakes suddenly opened their mouths wide, hissing at him as they lunged forward. He remained still, unafraid, thinking that even the children in the other nursery rooms could be in danger. Then he quickly reached out with both hands and grabbed the two snakes tightly. Once he had a hold of the snakes, his youthful face twisted into a terrifying expression. His eyes widened, glowing with a menacing red light. He thought, just as expected from the Baskerville family, "I will end your lives with my own hands." After that, he struck down the two snakes, their blood splattering all over his bed sheets. The next morning, the Baskerville family was completely horrified to see a child peacefully sleeping next to the bodies of two bloody beasts. That day, the nanny was ordered to guard the child who had been tortured and executed. In the end, the reason for the existence of the bloody remains remained a mystery to everyone. After those people left the room, he opened his eyes, glaring at them with a deadly gaze. He thought that only he, alone with a young hunting dog, could truly see the truth. 8 years after that incident, he had grown taller. He was now sitting in a classroom with children his age. Above him, the teacher was instructing the students below. The teacher looked at the children and said, "Dear young masters, today we will learn about the stages of a swordsman. If a swordsman cannot infuse their mana into their sword, they are called a novice swordsman. Once they can infuse even a little bit of mana into their sword, they are referred to as a sword graduator. And finally, when that aura can be gathered and transformed according to the will of the swordsman, they are recognized as a sword master, the best of Baskerville. Lord Hugo is also a master swordsman. The children sitting below were amazed, or mouths to gape, wow. But he was different. He sat in silence thinking, at present, Hugo is already a sword master. I need to recover all my strength from before I was reset before the coming-of-age ceremony. The teacher up front noticed his lack of reaction, adjusted his glasses, and pondered. Young Master Viker suddenly remembered. With the enhanced body he gained from immersing himself in the river Styx for 7 minutes, along with his genius-level analytical mind that surpassed others, his talents were on a different level compared to the other heirs. The head of the family would be thrilled to hear about the achievements he had accomplished. He remained seated, lost in his thoughts. How many years will it take for me to defeat Hugo? Viker van Baskerville was now 8 years old. Despite his age, his face already showed a sharpness and maturity that set him apart. The scene shifts to another place where 3 kids share the same face. Even their eyes and smiles look identical. The only difference that sets them apart is the strand of hair on their foreheads. One has 1 strand, the next has 2, and the last one has 3. They're all wearing a very creepy smile. One of them shows a hand into the guy's chest and shouts, "Hey, you filthy bastard, you're nothing but trash, but there are some strange rumors about you. Do you know that?" This is the voice of the kid with 1 strand of hair. The other 2 immediately echo the last 2 words of his sentence. "Do you know? Do you know?" The kid with 1 strand speaks up again. "You soaked in the river Styx for 7 minutes straight and even killed 2 deadly bloody Nambas right after you were born." He stays silent looking at them, thinking, "I know these little punks very well. They're the ones who falsely accused me and stabbed me while I was trying to escape. They go by the nickname the Trident of Hugo Baskerville." As he's lost in thought, the kid with 1 strand suddenly yells, "Stop your tricks." The other 2 chime in right after, "Stop it! Stop it!" The 3 kids are named Highborough Baskerville, the one with 1 strand, Middlebrough Baskerville, the one with 2 strands, and Lowbrow Baskerville, the one with 3 strands. All 3 are a year older than him. They clenched their fists and moved closer to him. Highborough Baskerville spoke up, "I don't think I have any fondness for you at all." The other 2 echoed, "Neither do I, neither do I." He stood there, thinking even in just 10 years, these will become incredibly annoying foes that I'll have to face. It's best to intimidate them now and prevent trouble later. Then Highborough Baskerville aimed a knife at his face. He calmly stared at the blade. The guy pointed the knife at him and said, "After soaking in the waters of the river Styx, your body will become as hard as cold steel. You won't be harmed by swords or blades anymore. That's what I've heard, which means you won't die if I stab you right." The other 2 chimed in, right. With that, Highborough Baskerville turned to call for Lowbrow. Lowbrow replied, "I understand, Highborough." After that response, Lowbrow quickly moved behind him and covered his mouth with a hand. With a disdainful look, he said, "You think you can last a minute in the waters of the Styx? I'll eat my own hand if you manage to last even 3 minutes. With a determined gaze, he thought, "I guess they really are right. Kids can be even crueler than adults. I suppose I'll just play along with them for a while." The other 2 boys stood there, smirking as they watched him being silenced by Lowbrow, thinking, there's no way those rumors can be true. A minute passed, and Highborough, with a slightly incredulous expression, said, "He's really holding on. He's lasting a long time." Middlebrow chimed in, "He really is holding on." 3 more minutes went by, and it didn't stop at just 3 minutes. He had been held for a full 10 minutes. The 2 boys turned pale, sweating with fear. Even Lowbrow, who was covering his mouth, looked shocked. All three of them thought, could the rumors actually be true? Highbrow stuttered, it's not fun anymore. Let him go. Middlebrow added, yeah, let him go. Hearing that, Lowbrow said, fine, let him go. Then, he covered the man's mouth with his hand and was stunned to find that his index finger had been bitten off. It was only after that he felt the pain and screamed. Ah! The man stood there and immediately spat out the finger that he had bitten off. The Middlebrow guy was so scared that he stammered, What? What are you doing? With a face like a demon, eyes glowing with a terrifying red light, he wiped the blood from his mouth and looked at the man like a creature from hell. He grinned, showing his teeth, and said, Didn't you just say you would eat your own hand? The three men faced him, fear clearly written on their faces, yet they tried to act tough. One of the highbrow guys said, Even if you can do that, we're not afraid of you. Lowbrow, standing next to him, chimed in, not afraid. But then, unlike before when he would insist he wasn't scared, he clutched his hand, tears welling up in his eyes as he yelled, I'm scared. The other two looked at him with confused expressions. He then cried out, sniffing and whining, My hand is cut off. Highbrow hesitated and said, Calm down, little brother. Let's get the pastor to fix it. Middlebrow replied, Let's go. Lowbrow bowed his head in pain, tears welling up as he groaned, Oh. He stood there, listening to them talk, his head bowed in a somber mood as he said, Who gave you permission to leave? Highbrow, furious at this, gripped his knife tightly and lunged at him, shouting, You bastard! Did you forget that we're older than you? He plunged the blade into his stomach, but was surprised to find that it only tore a small hole in his shirt, revealing a bit of skin underneath with no harm done. The blade was just a millimeter away from his flesh. Above him, he heard his voice say, I think you've forgotten, brother. The reason Highbrow's knife didn't reach his skin was that he had grabbed the handle and twisted it back, making the knife drop from Highbrow's hand. He calmly said, This is Baskerville. If you have enough strength and skill, age doesn't matter. With his arm twisted painfully behind him, Highbrow cried out in agony, La. His calm and expressionless face turned into that of a demon. He leaned down, staring intently at him, and said, Let's play this game to the end, my brothers. Terrified, he screamed, Are the rumors true? Then he landed a powerful punch right to his face, causing all of his teeth to fly out. Blood spurted from his nose, his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed to the ground. The two others stood frozen, panic setting in as they shouted, Big brother! The guy from Middlebrow, seeing this, was furious and got into a fighting stance, shouting, You bastard. But before he could do anything, the first guy kicked him hard in the face, making one side of his cheek cave in. Only the last guy was left. He was so scared he fell to the ground, screaming in terror. He stood there without looking at him and said, Don't be afraid. You will heal if treated in time, but I won't let you leave this room. At this rate, you'll be disabled for the rest of your life. As he spoke, he bent down to pick up Highbrow's knife. He held it up, examined it, and cheerfully said, So I'll generously let one of you leave. Lowbrow quickly asked, Really? One of us gets to leave. At that moment, the other two struggled to sit up. One clutched his bloodied mouth, while the other held his bloodied face, groaning, Oh, ah! Then he tossed the knife down in front of them and said, That's up to you to decide. With that, he turned to leave, saying, I won't wait long, so make your decision quickly. He looked back, his face grim, and said, At least one of you should live, right? They all stared down at the knife, then glanced at each other, and soon the sound of fighting broke out among them. He stood at the doorway, hands in his pockets, grinning maliciously. Meanwhile, Baskerville's trident shattered right in front of him. The scene shifts to a spacious room where the butler, John Barrymore, is reading an announcement. Chief, there's been another clash with the Morgor family at the Ruby Mine. The Moore family is demanding the Ruby Mine is within their territory. As the butler finishes speaking, a voice comes from a man seated across from him. We will have the opportunity to discuss this with them as soon as possible. The Morgor family will approach us first. Is there anything else you need to report? The butler stands there and replies regarding the recent midterm assessments at the children's castle. The young master achieved the top position in the writing exam. The man in the chair speaks up. Is that true? That's Hugo of Baskerville. He then asks, when will the practical exams take place? The butler answers they will begin in 5 days. The castle's guardian knights are preparing for the trip, so the children's castle will be completely empty during that time. Then, with a scared expression, the butler, sweating, says, Master, there are some matters I must discuss regarding the children's castle. There was a major confrontation involving the young master recently. The old man asked, a major fight? Huh? How many died? The old master replied, not a single person died, but the highbrow hair has completely damaged teeth. The middlebrow hair has a sunken jaw, and a lowbrow hair has lost its index finger. They've received treatment and have recovered, but they are deeply scarred emotionally. Hearing this, the old man said, Aren't they close to each other? I suspect they wouldn't attack one another like that. The steward responded to the old man's doubt. They fought against their other brothers. The one who put them in this state is their younger brother, who is just a year younger than them. The herd who ranked first in the competition I just mentioned is none other than Viker. The old man was taken aback by the steward's answer. In front of the room where the old man was sitting, a lavish hallway greeted his eyes, filled with expensive chandeliers and intricate carvings on the walls. He had been invited into the old man's room after what the steward had reported. He walked in and wearing a cheerful expression, standing straight, or perhaps looking back over his shoulder at the old man. The old man bowed his head and said with a gentle smile, "You prone a lot, Viker." He smiled happily and greeted the old man. "Good afternoon, master," he said. The old man responded to his greeting. "Master, I suppose I am the head of a clan." Then he looked at him and asked, "I've heard you left the trio in the advanced class incapacitated." With an innocent expression, he placed a finger on his lips and replied, "I've heard they received special treatment." Hearing his response, the old man became serious and said, "I'm not talking about their physical condition. I'm referring to the way you've hurt their hearts. Since that day, they started eating separately and have stopped talking to each other. Their combined three-pronged attack was a work of art, but you've created a significant rift between them." He looked at the old man and smiled without saying a word. Then the old man asked him, "Don't you think you've done anything wrong?" He answered, "Wrong? Where did I go wrong?" The old man replied, "Haven't you turned your brothers into wrecks?" After that question, his gaze seemed to become hollow as he said, "But I'm stronger than they are. How could someone strong make a mistake?" The old man replied, "Your brothers came before you and generously forgave you. Do you still feel no guilt?" The steward next to him was so frightened that he started to sweat. He quickly replied, "Forgive you?" Then you recalled the past, the time before the reversion and the last child of the family faced the end and went to meet the Baskerville family directly. You became a nun after all these years, he remembered. She had told him that she forgave him. After hearing that, Hugo replied, "When you come here, do not think in your head." He spoke out loud, his face twisted. "I believe that forgiveness is nothing more than a way for the weak to apologize when they cannot take revenge." Hearing this, the old man smiled with satisfaction on his terrifying face. He said, "Strength is justice and being weak is a sin. It seems that you understand the principles of the Baskerville family well." Then he called out to the steward, "Barrymore." The steward was a bit surprised that he was called and quickly responded, "Yes, sir." The old man reached out his hand towards him and said, "Go to the food storage and get this kid anything he wants to eat. But don't be greedy. Just give him things he can carry." His face broke into a smile as he asked, "Can I have chocolate?" "Thank you," added the family. Then he turned and left the room with the butler. As he was walking, the old man called him back. "Son, with the upcoming midterm evaluations, do your best and don't fall behind anyone in the main household." Hearing this, he slightly turned his head, his face darkening, eyes reflecting his annoyance as he gritted his teeth and replied, "Yes, head of the family." He was led by the butler to a large storage room. Once there, the butler introduced, "This is the type of chocolate that the young ladies of the Morgue family, known for their taste, enjoy. This is the highest quality product we've managed to obtain this time." He replied, "I don't eat any processed types." The butler looked puzzled. "Huh?" He turned to the butler and said, "I want cocoa beans, a kind with a strong flavor." The puzzled butler asked, "Are you talking about unprocessed cocoa beans?" A bag of unprocessed cocoa beans was placed in front of him. The butler added, "This is blood bean, a type of cocoa with an incredibly appealing flavor. Just one bean can make 100 liters of chocolate." He picked one up and took a bite. As he tasted the bitter cocoa, he grimaced internally, scoffing at it. "I can't believe he actually eats these raw, bitter beans. He must really love chocolate." The butler watched him and thought, young Master Viker is trying to decipher the chief's words by making it enticing enough for him to admit it. He realized that Viker was coming up with a clever way to eat as much chocolate as possible within those limits. At that moment, a chef standing nearby asked, "Young Master, should we prepare these in the kitchen before bringing them to you?" He replied, "You don't need to prepare them, just bring them to me as they are." Upon hearing this, the butler adjusted his glasses in surprise. "Huh? Is he uniquely different?" Viker doesn't want chocolate because he wants to eat them raw. The purpose of these blood beans would reveal itself during the practical exam in 5 days. Finally, the day of the practical exam has arrived. On this day, an unprecedented event occurs. A major incident will take place within the Baskerville family. Known to the world as the family of madmen, the Baskervilles train their children meticulously. The children must climb a steep mountain to build basic endurance after learning how to walk, and they cannot take breaks outside of the scheduled times. When they sleep, they have to rest alongside the corpses of a demon or a minor devil to adapt to the harsh environment. Once this phase ends, they turn 8 years old. The young hounds will face evaluations filled with terrifying challenges. This is why the Baskerville family has earned the title of madmen. Returning to the practical exam, it is a real assessment, a survival test. Today, the young hounds gather at Le Rouge at Lenore Mountain, a place teeming with demonic creatures trapped at the border of their territory. At this moment, the children are lined up on one side, facing a group of individuals dressed in hooded robes, all wearing masks that obscure their faces. From a distance, they looked no different from wizards. At the top among them stood a person dressed like a leader. This person spoke. Gentlemen, the practical assessment's content is still quite simple. This is Pavia van Baskerville, the guide of the Baskerville family, also known as the Shadow Dog. He swept his hand to the side and announced loudly, "Survive here for a month and hunt powerful magical creatures. You just need to remember two things. You will receive 10 points for successfully saving someone's life. You will get 30 points if you save that person without sustaining serious injuries and 50 points for surviving by eliminating another hair. You will earn 70 points for hunting down a magical creature and surviving, and 90 points if you meet all the conditions mentioned earlier. Additionally, gaining a badge by stealing another person's badge will count towards your reward points. You will receive no points if you die. There is no way to achieve 100 points. I hope all of you remember the teachings of Hugo. Lowering your guard will lead to death. I advise you not to leave the Forbidden Zone, as the Le Rouge at Lenore Mountain has many dangerous areas that remain unexplored. Therefore, I suggest you stay within the territory where the demonic creatures we have tamed reside. The Shadow Dog, our guardian knight, will secretly score your performance during the competition." He was standing there, seriously listening to Flo van Baskerville, when he noticed two guys next to him whispering about him. The guy with the red eyes spoke up, "Is that the one who was submerged in the river Styx for 7 minutes?" The guy next to him, with hair styled to one side, replied, "I've heard the rumors. He managed to strangle 2 poisonous snakes in his cradle. I also heard he aced the written test. Let's see if he does well in the practical assessment." He wasn't paying attention to what they were saying about him. He was just standing there thinking, "Le Rouge at Lenore Mountain. I haven't been here for a while." Above him were the 3 triplet boys. They no longer seemed as close as before, and it looked like all 3 were sweating nervously because he was standing right behind them. Pavia van Baskerville took out the bell, raised it, and said, "This bell will signal the start of the evaluation. I pray for your success." As he finished speaking, he rang the bell, marking the beginning of the assessment. Just a second after the bell chimed, there were no kids in front of him anymore. The boy with red eyes was the first to speak, running quickly while thinking, "I need to secure a good spot first, so I'll head to the location that was focused on during last year's exam." 2 other boys followed him. One of them thought, "There's no rule saying we have to survive alone. We can just stick to him and steal points." Turning to the 3 triplet boys, they all dashed off like the other kids. Highbrow spoke up, "Secure that area first." Middlebrow shied a glare and replied, "Don't boss me around." Lowbrow also glared at Highbrow and said, "I'll take care of myself. You should focus on your own game." Back where everyone had gathered, Pavia van Baskerville stood there smoking, wondering, has it started yet? Regarding this evaluation, the exam doesn't encourage killing others. It's not prohibited, but it's simply not encouraged. There will be point deductions for killing, so they'll try their hardest to avoid taking lives with their own hands. He spoke up saying, "Well, with Shadow Dog keeping watch, everything will likely keep death at bay." The scene shifted to where he was, where a masked figure stood behind Pavia van Baskerville. At first, he was hidden behind a tree, watching him closely. The figure thought, "This place is near unexplored territory. How far do you plan to go, young Master Viker?" He was a prodigy who had shown remarkable skills since childhood. I can't wait to see what he will reveal. While the watcher observed him, he casually explored his surroundings. He muttered to himself, "Is it around here?" Then he picked up a long stick to probe the ground. As he searched, he said, "The ground should be soft enough. Now I'll decide where to settle for a while. Isn't it time I enjoyed my vacation?" The watcher, hearing his words, was taken aback and thought, "A vacation." Looking over at him, he was holding a pile of small firewood. At the same time, the kids were fighting each other to score points for themselves. He was just wiping the sweat from his forehead after digging a hole for a while. 3 triplets were battling against a giant bear together. Meanwhile, he was leisurely resting in the wooden tent he made himself. One watching him felt completely helpless as he was genuinely enjoying his vacation instead of fighting or killing for points. From a distance, he thought, all this guy does is sleep and spend days digging a hole. Besides that, he just hunts for food to eat and collects firewood. Is he really planning to hide here and kill time? He wondered. I've heard some rumors. They say he's a genius, huh? Maybe I don't need to keep an eye on him since he doesn't seem to have any intention of escaping. Ending his thoughts, he turned away. The man was sitting by the fire waiting for the meat to cook when he casually glanced over and noticed that the watcher had just left. He smirked and thought, finally, he's gone. It turned out he had known from the start that he was being watched. So, during that time, he really acted like he was on vacation to let the guy lower his guard. He mused, camping is a bit nostalgic. Then he remembered the past himself as a grown man. At that time, he was on La Rouge at Lenore Mountain. He recalled the words of a person with long hair that obscured their eyes. Hey, Lear, cocoa beans are the best for masking the smell of meat, especially when it's loaded with blood. Back in the present, he thought about what that person had said and took out the cocoa beans he had received when he met Hugo, then threw them into the fire before him. He watched the flames flare up and said, the obstacles have vanished and my preparations are complete. Should I start my hunt? Around him were holes he had dug over the past few days, each with sharpened stakes planted inside. A few days later, in an unexplored area, he was deepening his journey alone, looking around and thinking about what lay beyond, a territory he hadn't yet explored. However, all of this was his backyard when he used to be a scout. His backyard been a place where he could go freely, a place where he could come and go as he pleased. He looked straight ahead, thinking of a burning smell that made his nose sting. Could it be something burning? What was that? It was feces on fire. Then he noticed something, an object that was also being burned. He saw it and called out, I found it. There was only one creature around this burning mess producing such waste. I've been sick of these during my reconnaissance days, but now that I see one, I can't help but feel welcoming, he said, looking up the monster. Flames blazed brightly from its body. It was the Hellhound. It opened its shark-toothed jaws wide at him. In its mouth, it seemed to hold a blazing fireball. Smoke rose from that fireball and escaped from its mouth. It looked terrifying. The Hellhound had a danger level of B+ with a body size of 10 feet. It appeared in the La Rouge at Lenore Mountains on the second slope. A Hellhound with fire in its mouth was a creature that brought disaster to anyone who encountered it. Even a single bite could lead to instant death. The sulfurous fire it spewed from its eyes and mouth came from the deepest depths of the burning hell and couldn't be extinguished until the life it targeted was completely consumed. He stood there looking at the Hellhound and thought, these infernal creatures are covered in hellfire. They are the Hellhounds. The dog was slowly moving toward him. As he watched it approach, he thought, before I regressed, I could only fight one when I was 18. So obviously, a direct confrontation would be too much for an 8-year-old like me. But I know a way for a child to defeat a Hellhound. Then he ran quickly toward the Hellhound. It also charged at him, no longer moving slowly. He flew toward it and thought, the first weakness of the Hellhound is that it can only move in a straight line. It takes quite a while for it to change direction. And it was true. As it sprinted toward him, ready to deliver a deep wound, he quickly dodged its incoming attack, and it actually landed right where he had just stood. It took a moment for the Hellhound to turn slowly and look at him. It seemed very angry at his move, furrowing its brow and glaring at him. He stood there, picked up a bottle of water, and said, the second weakness of Hellhounds is that for some reason, these hellish creatures cannot cross water, no matter how small the amount. After finishing his sentence, he poured the water onto the ground in front of him and quickly ran away from it. As he ran, he glanced back at the creature chasing him, thinking, in this situation, the Hellhound will slow down and try to reach me, exposing the fatal weakness of monsters like it. I'm counting on them opening their mouths while running. Sure enough, it managed to catch up and opened its mouth wide. He seemed to be waiting for this moment, flipped something into its mouth, and quickly dodged to the side. The Hellhound dashed past him before stopping. It stood still for a moment, then suddenly made an expression of realization so intense that its eyes bulged and it collapsed onto the ground. Standing behind it, he laughed wickedly and said, for dogs, chocolate is a lethal poison, and if it's made from red cacao beans, which can produce 100 chocolates from just one bean, it's definitely even more effective against these dogs. It turned out that what he had just thrown into its mouth was a cocoa bean, and it suffocated and died from the cocoa lodged in its throat. He drew the sword at his side, his gaze terrifying as he stared at the Hellhound, saying, indeed, these Hellhounds can't handle chocolate. It probably affects their heart and stomach first. Those areas are protected by sturdy ribs, so I need to aim for the areas without ribs. That's their kidneys. With that, he thrust the sword hard into its kidney. The Hellhound truly met a gruesome fate, choking on the chocolate while also being stabbed in the kidney. He didn't just stab it. He also sliced a line right where he had thrust. After pulling the sword out, a stream of blue energy suddenly wafted out from the wound. This energy appeared because when someone defeats a monster, the experience points are absorbed into their body, making them stronger. He stood there, absorbing all that energy into himself. He remarked, it seems the sword has become much lighter. At this rate, my strength will increase quickly. Before long, I'll be as powerful as I was in my previous life. He spoke while swinging his sword back and forth to test the newfound strength he had gained. Then he looked at the dead Hellhound and said, I wonder what it would be like for an 8-year-old to take down a monster like Hugo. He chuckled wickedly, thinking that with what he had accomplished, he was sure to be at the top. It seemed like it was time to think about the reward, a reward that he couldn't even dream of in his previous life. No one here knew its true value yet. Then he spoke. Now, let's just take its head. But as soon as he finished speaking, he was startled by some noise behind him. When he turned around, he found that other hellhounds had quietly gathered behind him. He just turned slightly to check out the source of the sound and then turned his back to them, calmly muttering to himself. Looks like they heard the howl and came to avenge their fallen comrade. Such loyalty among pack members, isn't it? Then he swiftly cut off the head of the first hellhound. He held it in his hand and turned to face the other hellhounds, smirking as he said, "Well, I'm not planning to kill just one of you. Come on over, I have plenty of cocoa beans." But the hellhounds suddenly felt fear, as if they sensed some terrifying presence. He was surprised by their reaction and thought, are they actually scared of an 8-year-old? Hellhounds never back down, even if it means death. Could it be because of? Thinking this, he turned to look behind him and saw another monster standing there. This creature looked similar to the hellhounds, but it had 3 heads. Moreover, it was surrounded by flames that resembled those of the hellhounds, but were a striking blue. Seeing it, he suddenly thought, the 3-headed Cerberus. The 3-headed Cerberus is a creature with a danger level of A+. Why is an entity meant to be on the 7th level appearing down here on the 1st? Viker looked closely at the creature's body and was startled to realize it's bleeding. As he examined it further, he saw the wounds from arrows covering its body. Is someone trying to hunt it? He remembered that on the other side of the mountain was the territory of the barbarian tribes. If the creature had been chased all the way here by them, this was indeed an opportunity. An A+ level creature, and had serious injuries. I have to take it down now. I'll use everything I have. Before we dive into the battle between him and the A+ monster, let's talk about Viker. He had kept all his skills hidden within the Baskerville clan. His swordsmanship was at an advanced level, and his mastery of the Baskerville trident had reached a point where other hunters could only dream of it in their prime. Back to the fight, he stood there, aimed his sword at the A+ monster, channeled his strength into the blade, and charged at the creature, swinging down hard at its center head. Without pausing, he quickly slashed at the 2 outer heads on either side. He eyed the situation with a dangerous gaze, his confident expression suggesting he believed he could handle it. All of that because he was like a wounded 3-headed dog, Cerberus. Before regressing to the battle against the monster, Viker's swordsmanship had been honed to perfection, with no wasted movements when it came to taking out his foes. Above all, he possessed a body enhanced by the river Styx. The weapon Viker wielded was more than enough to inflict damage on a 3-headed Cerberus. But no, that was just his misguided belief. He was caught off guard when the sword in his hand was crushed by the beast's bite. In a moment of carelessness, he provided an opportunity for Cerberus to strike with its claws, sending him flying. He crashed hard against the large tree right behind him. As he slammed into the tree trunk, he barely managed to let out a gasp of Q-Huck before spitting blood. Speaking of Cerberus, this beast was rated A+ in danger. It resided on the 7th level of the Le Rouge at Lenore Mountain, known as the Guardian of the Underworld. Cerberus had no interest in the souls that fell into hell. However, the moment a soul attempted to escape, it would tear that soul apart. It resided deep within the underworld, where all souls ultimately came to rest. Cerberus was the strongest monster among all canine-type creatures. Cerberus lunged at him, sending him crashing into a nearby tree, the impact knocking the breath out of him. Stunned, he bit down hard, feeling a sharp pain ripple through him, and he spat blood from the attack. Viker stood there, dazed and frozen. He gritted his teeth and widened his eyes at the 3-headed monster, thinking, I just lost consciousness after being struck by that little Cerberus as it approached the guy sitting under the tree. When a wave of numbness suddenly hit him, he thought my entire left arm is in excruciating pain. Did it break? Viker looked down at his left arm. There was a large tear in his uniform along with an open wound from its claws. But the flesh wound was just a normal injury. This led him to conclude, even if the Cerberus is hurt too, my injury is like this only because of the curse of the river Styx. Long live the river Styx. Thinking quickly, Viker dodged as the Barrow's vehicle lunged at the tree again. He frowned, realizing that if he kept taking hits, he wouldn't survive. It was a tough situation, but even in these circumstances, a seasoned hunter would find the best solution. Right now, the best thing he could do was, as Viker processed his thoughts, one of Cerberus's heads turned toward him in surprise. Not because he was fighting back, but because he was running so fast. Viker thought to himself, running was definitely the best option at this moment. In an instant, Cerberus took off after him. As he ran, he muttered under his breath, if it weren't for its injury, I'd already be caught and torn to shreds. Maybe I should thank those forest warriors on the mountain. Viker's eyes caught sight of something ahead, a fence. He quickly formulated a plan. The other side of the fence was outside the boundaries. If he could get there, he might make it. With that thought, Viker leaped over the fence just as Cerberus was closing in. He reminded himself if he got caught before that, it would all be over. As he realized the threat was closing in, the three-headed Cerberus became even more aggressive. It was as if a switch had flipped, putting them into high gear. Viker sprinted past the trees, desperately searching for something. He kept asking himself, where is it? It has to be around here somewhere. Suddenly, beneath a canopy of leaves, Viker felt a surge of hope. There it is, he thought, pushing himself to run forward, encouraging himself, just a little more, just a bit further. At that moment, the Cerberus was very close, its lethal intent more palpable than ever. Without warning, he sprang up on his toes, whispering to himself that it was time. Viker then executed a roll, while the monsters frantically chased after him. Midway through, Viker caught sight of their jaws right in front of him. However, as their feet hit the ground, the earth beneath them began to sink. Even Cerberus realized it had stepped into a trap and quickly descended into panic. Finally, Viker landed on his back on the other side. He lay there staring up at the moon, letting out a long breath. At that moment, Cerberus fell into a trap made of sharp spears. It pierced through Cerberus's body, and his blood quickly stained the area around the spears red. Viker felt a surge of joy inside. Welcome to the Cradle of Swords, Sos. Sos sat up, excited to watch while thinking. Who would have thought that the trap I set to deal with a pack of hellhounds would end up catching Cerberus? Just like those hunting dogs, Cerberus was still a dog. The blood essence sticking to the spearheads acted like a poison. As he thought this, the Cerberus began to weaken, its two heads slumping while blood oozed from its mouth. This made the central head furious. It growled in rage. From a distance, Viker held a wooden spear and slowly raised it high. He joked, I guess a high-level monster doesn't die from just one hit, huh? With that, Viker gathered all his strength and hurled the spear at Cerberus. The spear, coated with snake venom, flew swiftly toward the helpless Cerberus, pinning it to the ground. The creature howled in anger, and Viker stood there, beginning to count. 1, 2, 3, 4. At that moment, the Cerberus rose from the spear. Viker continued counting 5, 6, 7. When he reached 7, the Cerberus faced Viker and finally met the same fate as the other two heads. Viker simply watched without saying anything. He felt relieved and wiped the sweat from his forehead while staring at the Cerberus' body on the ground. He let out a breath, realizing he had been counting steps until the Cerberus fell. He spoke up, exactly 7 steps. The rumor is true. Viker glanced at the spear he had thrown earlier and said, the wooden spear I just threw was a bit different. One bite shouldn't have taken it down in just 7 steps. The spear was coated with the poison of the bloody Namba. Thankfully, I had kept it when I was younger. He looked at his palm, which was shielded by spiritual energy, and remarked, I can sense energy from the Cerberus. Seems like all 3 heads are dead now. Viker looked back at the body in front of him, wondering, how am I going to get it out of here? The cause of death is pretty clear. The night guards are likely to suspect me soon. Before that, there's something I need to do. He thought Cerberus is a guardian beast with a passion for protecting its territory, so there must be a dungeon around here somewhere. A dungeon, a strange place full of treasures, can also be home to powerful monsters. Viker pondered, it's possible the dungeon is empty if the guardian is gone. If I disguise myself with the scent of the Sus, I can avoid most monsters. Viker immediately smeared dirt on his body. He continued to think, rotten soil, dry leaves, broken branches, footprints, and leftover saliva. I'll follow these traces to find my way back. He slowly trudged forward until he stood before a cave emitting a magical light. Viker said, here it is, the dungeon that the Sus guards. As he stepped inside, looking around, he remembered, I've been here before I was reborn. I found it 10 years later, but back then it was empty. But now it's different. Amid the smell of decay, I can sense the scent of mana, indicating that no one has touched this place. Viker looked into the dark, deep cave ahead and said, the light can't reach the end of the tunnel. It seems deeper than I thought. But after a moment of reflection, Viker felt even more excited. His pupils quickly constricted, and he confidently continued into the pitch-black cave. Curiously, he wondered, I wonder what treasure is waiting for me in here. As Viker stepped further into the cave, he observed the 2 walls and guessed there were quite a few veins of rubies along them. It seemed this place was connected to Chayem Mountain, a branch of the Lueno Sun, the Red All Mountain. Suddenly, a brilliant light at the end of the tunnel caught Viker's attention. That light must be coming from the dungeon, he thought. After following the direction of the light for a while, he had to squint and raise his hand to shield his eyes because right in front of him was a massive ruby glowing a deep red, sitting in the center of the room. Viker approached to examine it. It radiated light within the dungeon. This must be an artifact that emits light by absorbing mana and channeling it into the ruby, he mused. Viker noticed something unusual and let out a small sound. As he looked at the decaying skeleton in the corner of the room, he wondered, has someone been here before me? He picked up the letter that the unfortunate person had written. placed it beside him, and assessed the condition of the corpse in front of him. The body showed injuries all over, as if it had been slashed multiple times by a knife, and the blood had long since dried. Viker concluded, "It seems like it's been a while." He began to read the final letter of this ill-fated individual. "At this moment, my name is no longer important, so it can be anything. I will call myself Cain. I see no reason to stain this clean paper with my real name." As he read on, Viker recognized the familiar writing style. This way of writing had been passed down through the Baskerville family for generations. Could this person also be a member of the Baskerville clan? The letter continued, "I'm documenting this because I want those who come after me not to make the same mistakes I did." The truth of the story gradually unfolds with each word. The family legends have told that this place is an ancient dungeon, and my brother Aben stumbled upon it by chance. We attempted countless times to explore this dungeon. We have defeated numerous monsters and reached the chamber containing this stone where we encountered a supreme riddle. This riddle kept us occupied for a long time. For 3 whole years. Viker casually made a slightly mocking comment. 3 years, huh? They must be itching to get their hands on that treasure inside. That ultimate riddle is probably hiding somewhere in the dungeon. He looked at the stone pedestal, where the ruby had the winding words of doubt inscribed on it. Could this be it? Viker read aloud the tricky riddle. What is 1 when it enters but becomes 2 inside, and can only leave when it is 1? The letter continued, stating, "With our narrow-minded thinking about this riddle, my twin brother and I pondered for a long time and reached a conclusion. We are twins. When we were in our mother's womb, we were 1, but when we were born, we became 2. Only one of us can leave with the treasure we find, right?" That person had come to a harsh conclusion, which also meant that after a long and brutal battle, I killed my brother. Now there's only one person left in this place, but even then, nothing has changed here. That person is almost driven mad with rage. We are now 1, but what have I gained from it? I killed my brother. I killed him. Every word written by this person reflects deep sorrow and unbearable torment. After immense regret, I decided to leave this place. If anyone is brave enough to come here, I want to tell you something. Get out of here immediately. Everything this place produces drives people insane with greed. There's nothing to be gained in this cursed cave. After reading the letter, Viker shrugged. In short, what he meant was that despite going through everything to get here, there's no reward at all. But I'm not a twin. Viker looked at the bright ruby stone, contemplating, but I'm not a twin. The riddle posed remains the same, meaning Cain and Abel must have misinterpreted it. What is 1 when it enters, but becomes 2 once inside, and can only leave when it is 1 again? What could that be about? Viker focused all his energy on piecing together the events and arranging the clues. He thought a dungeon that can't be discovered simply doesn't exist. Suddenly, when Viker let out a sound, it seemed he had uncovered the truth behind this puzzling riddle. He looked at the skeleton in front of him, smirked, and exclaimed, "There's no way to overlook that brilliant fiery red ruby." Feeling quite pleased with himself, Viker continued, "So it's this. Cain and Abel were just 2 unlucky brothers. Because there were 2 of them, they got stuck in their situation and couldn't solve the riddle." Viker reached out and touched the ruby. The dark tunnel contrasted sharply with the brightly lit chamber. The answer to the riddle was, in fact, the dungeon itself. He kept explaining his reasoning. When we first entered, we became 1 with the dark tunnel. But the moment we reached this place, we became 2 because of the light from the ruby. Viker decisively destroyed the large ruby because he was confident he had the correct answer. To make it dark again, the final area of the dungeon would be opened. The ruby shattered into countless pieces that scattered everywhere. Viker confidently concluded, the answer is my shadow. The broken ruby radiated a strange power, and soon it began to shine brightly, transferring its energy to unlock the mechanism of the final door. Viker felt an overwhelming excitement as he observed that he had successfully passed what seemed like the most challenging obstacle. So this is what those 2 brothers fought each other over? Inside the secret room stood a peculiar sword, exuding an intense and terrifying aura, firmly embedded on an ancient pedestal, etched with countless swirling characters. Viker wondered aloud, could this be the sacred artifact of the demon's lair? The sword before him felt alive, not only possessing immense power, but also radiating an imposing presence. The inscription below read, "Only the blood of the Baskerville clan can draw out Beelzebub." Viker couldn't help but be amazed by the origin of this sword. This is Beelzebub. This sacred artifact can really be found here. In his mind, Viker recalled information about this legendary sword. I remember seeing illustrations of this sword in a mythology book I read in my past life. He thought about the ancient myth that never mentioned the mighty demons that had overrun the land, totaling 7 calamities. To combat these 7 calamities, the leaders of the 7 clans rose to fight each demon individually. The scene of the chosen one from the Baskerville clan fiercely battling the brutal Beelzebub unfolded in Viker's mind. Back then, the demon faced by the Baskerville clan was Rue, Gluttony Beelzebub. Since then, what remained of Beelzebub was sealed within the territory of the Baskerville clan, and the dark energy that Beelzebub emanated attracted monsters. At least that's what the legend said, but no one really believed it. The sword emanated a scent of death that truly suited its title as the Wicked Sword. However, that legend turned out to be true, and in the future, this sword would fall into the hands of a demon, bringing death to countless human warriors on the battlefield. Viker did not hesitate to grasp the sword. He boldly declared, "But in this lifetime, things like that won't happen again. After all, now it belongs to me." A tremendous surge of power erupted, shaking the entire cave. The sword seemed to be merging with Viker's arm, causing him some pain, but he gritted his teeth and pushed through the fusion. The black mark of Beelzebub etched deeply into the tendons of Viker's hand. The merging process was complete. The demon seal had fully integrated with Viker's body. It asserted its unrivaled position of brutal strength by summoning a sword that materialized from Viker's wrist. He gazed at the pitch-black sword featuring the three-eyed symbol of Beelzebub, a fierce aura radiating from it, revealing his excitement. This sword was forged from the remnants of Holy Scripture, a demon from hell, and achieving Beelzebub was truly beyond expectation. Viker's eyes now reflected pure exhilaration and an insatiable desire to conquer, like flames fueled by gasoline, blazing fiercely. I wonder how much stronger I will be in this lifetime. I can't wait for that moment. After acquiring Beelzebub, Viker decided it was time to withdraw. There's nothing left to take here. Should I go back? Suddenly, Viker's mind spun as if something was stirring his thoughts. He lost his balance and collapsed to the ground, sweat pouring off him. What's happening? I feel dizzy. It's not hunger. The cries of Beelzebub echoed loudly from Viker's own hands. Is it asking me to feed it? Viker clutched his stomach, staggering as he stumbled out of the cave. His face contorted in pain from the turmoil in both his body and mind. This wild craving makes it feel like my stomach is being ripped apart. My sense of smell seems sharper than ever because of this hunger. There's something that smells incredible. Suddenly, Beelzebub sprouted a feeding tentacle and compelled Viker to follow. It moved steadily forward. Viker, puzzled, tried to communicate. Are you saying there's something edible over there? After a while, it stopped in front of a pitch-black, motionless figure. Viker immediately recognized it, the corpse of the three-headed hellhound he had killed earlier. Beelzebub's hunger-sucking tendril shot out like lightning, burying itself into the body of the hellhound. Viker thought to himself, in a frenzy, Beelzebub was sucking away, satisfied and oblivious to anyone else. The gnawing hunger in Viker seemed to subside as well. The flow of blood through Beelzebub made him feel as if his stomach had come back to life. He guessed it had been starving for a long time. Yet, a sense of worry stirred within Viker. The trees were withered, and the land was barren. It couldn't all be due to Beelzebub's ravenous hunger. How much would he have to feed it to be satisfied? Once Beelzebub had its fill, it retracted its sucking tendril and let out a satisfied sound. A notification then appeared in the system. The hunger of Beelzebub, 1 blood point from the three-headed Hellhound B+, positions 2 and 3 are empty. Viker was a bit surprised by the notification. Is this Beelzebub's unique skill? Viker began to understand the mechanism behind Beelzebub's absolutely divine skill worthy of the 7 calamities. He had heard that Beelzebub's hunger could convert the skills of opponents into its own. It could absorb skills indefinitely, and those who were absorbed would be completely wiped out. Viker didn't rush into judgment, but carefully assessed the situation. He suspected there was a limit to the skills he could absorb since this was a corpse. The blood of the three-headed dog was so potent that even the smallest scratch would cause a horrendous amount of bleeding. Suddenly, Viker realized, wait a minute, if I can harness this skill. Before he could finish his thought, Beelzebub, driven by hunger, lunged forward, eager to drain the blood from the corpse. Viker quickly exclaimed, hold on. Given Beelzebub's intense craving, Viker reluctantly gave in. You can't consume all of it. It'll be hard to explain later when they examine it, and the body will be completely damaged. Seeing that Beelzebub was ignoring his words and was frantically sucking away, Viker felt exasperated and knew he had to act. He slapped Beelzebub and commanded, stop. It finally halted. Beelzebub whimpered in frustration. Meanwhile, its skills were enhanced from absorbing the blood. Burning Cerberus A+, Helldog Blood B+. Rapid regeneration, Rat F. Viker was stunned. Rapid regeneration had eaten the corpse of the brown rat beneath the Cerberus. Viker lifted the dead mouse to examine it. He was thrilled with the unexpected results, especially since he had managed to gain the Fireburn skill from Cerberus. With this skill he absorbed from the Hellhound, anyone struck by it would die instantly, a sensation even worse than being burned alive. Everything was ready. Viker felt relaxed as he thought, I prepared the monstrous creature for the practical exam. Now I just need to relax until the evaluation is over. A line of young swordsmen stood waiting for the results. These were the young hunters of Baskerville returning after completing their practical assessments. The evaluation continued, and the hues of the monster corpses caught by the young hunters formed shields, swords, and collars, which were returned as trophies. One of the monster carcasses brought in by a young hunter shocked the Baskervilles present so much that even the clan leader, Hugo Le Baskerville, was taken aback and asked again, "Who caught what?" Butler John Barryor reported that young master Viker Van Baskerville, 8 years old, accidentally ventured into an unexplored area during the exam and managed to hunt a dangerous A-plus level monster, a Cerberus. Hugo asked seriously, "Are you talking about the three-headed Cerberus that our Knightly Guard Guild has faced before?" Butler John continued, "I was informed that it had been injured earlier by savage tribes and had been poisoned." Hugo pressed, "What kind of poison is strong enough to take down a Cerberus, and how did it get poisoned in the first place?" Butler John couldn't explain it all clearly, so he simply stated, "There's nothing recorded in the hunting logs. I tried to ask the young master about it, but he said he was tired and went back to the dormitory, so..." Hugo stroked his chin, showing his intrigue. "This kid is quite clever. Knowledge is power, and power is value." Butler John questioned, "Honestly, I'm surprised that such talent is coming from a Van rather than a Lay or Le." Hugo hinted, "You don't quite understand me." Butler John quickly replied, "My apologies." Hugo expressed his views honestly. "Unlike the homeowners of previous generations, I don't care about bloodlines when raising a hunting dog. It doesn't matter to me whether it comes from a royal family or from nothing. All I care about is talent and determination." Hugo continued confidently, "I'm telling you, even the weakest can come from a good lineage, and the strong can come from humble beginnings. Do you understand what I'm saying?" The butler John quietly thought about the second son who was training in a secluded place. He politely replied to Hugo, "I apologize." Hugo, feeling lively, commanded, "No need to apologize, but I need something to lift my spirits. Bring that kid here." Butler John immediately complied, saying, "I will call young Master Viker." And just like that, Viker was called in to meet with Hugo. Without any small talk, Hugo got straight to the point. "I heard you killed the Cerberus during the practical exam. How did you manage that?" Viker confidently replied, "I fed it chocolate to kill it." Then came a continuous back and forth exchange between Hugo and Viker. Hugo asked, "Chocolate?" Viker explained, "Chocolate is actually deadly poison for hellhounds." Hugo said, "I see. That's why you requested chocolate." Viker confirmed, "Yes." Even John, the loyal butler who had served for a long time, found it a bit strange. He only keeps asking without even greeting, he thought. Is this really how we should have a conversation? Then Hugo seriously inquired, "I hear you didn't respond properly when he asked about the hunt. Why is that?" Viker clearly stated, "Because he is not my master." Hugo pressed, "Then who is?" Viker replied firmly, "I belong to the family, and the head of the family is my master. Who else could it be?" At that moment, Hugo smiled with satisfaction and praised him. "You've learned very well." Hugo then declared cheerfully, "As a reward, the body of the creature you caught will belong to you. Since you came in first, I'll grant you one wish." Viker excitedly clenched his fists, trying hard not to show his excitement. Inside, he thought, "I have waited for this moment. With it, I can achieve what I want." Viker's desire surprised both Hugo and the butler John. He wished to enter the 1,000 Library Holy Book. The scene was filled with an impressive treasure trove of deep knowledge, with towering bookshelves, illuminated by brilliant crystal lanterns. This was the 1,000 Library Holy Book, a colossal library located in the depths of the main stronghold of the Baskerville Society. It was one of the largest libraries in the Empire. Hugo spoke sternly, 1,000 Library Holy Book. Do you know that only the head of the household, the deputy, and core members are allowed in there? Viker, having already made up his mind, stood firm in his wish. If I can't be given permission, I will give up. He wondered, I guess I have no choice but to sneak in later. But surprisingly, everything went smoothly. Hugo granted permission for Viker to use the 1,000 Library Holy Book. He could enter. Hugo cheerfully gave Viker a command. In the deepest part of the library, I want you to read the 6th technique of Baskerville swordsmanship. It's located in the 6th restricted area. Upon hearing this, Viker was taken aback. The 6th technique of Baskerville swordsmanship. A fierce internal struggle ensued in his mind. Hugo allows a bastard like me to read that sword technique. There's no case of a bastard with the middle name Van ever having read beyond the 4th technique. I shouldn't get worked up. It's just the 6th technique after all. Deep down, Viker had a burning desire to surpass even Hugo. At present, Hugo had achieved the 7th technique, a remnant of Viker's past life. He could reach the 9th technique. Viker still remembered the insult he faced for being Hugo's illegitimate child. In this life, he was determined to surpass Hugo. Viker had a Jing plan in place to achieve his goal, as he had the sacred text of the swordsmanship, which contained the pure essence of Baskerville. He discovered it later in his past life, written by the founding head of the family who had defeated the 7 disasters. You will give you the sacred text of swordsmanship. Viker looked at Hugo, who was clasping his hands together, his gaze revealing an unmistakable challenge as he said, I'm really looking forward to it. Good luck. Viker felt more determined than ever. Hugo of Baskerville, you will be the one to give it to me. Bowing respectfully, Viker said, Thank you, sir. I will do my best to meet your expectations, and you will not realize the value of what you have offered. 2 serious bodyguards stood guard at the grand main entrance outside. Viker had been granted permission to use this place. He stood among the towering bookshelves, feeling incredibly small. The 1,000 library holy book, he thought. This was the first time he had ever seen this place in person. Viker ran his fingers along the titles of the books on the shelves, severing incisors, grinding molars, piercing canines, snaggletooth that embeds twice, wisdom teeth that lay down. Every sacred text contained the fighting techniques he wanted to learn before rewinding. They were all right here. In his heart, Viker was contemplating. In the Baskerville family, no matter how much a bastard child might possess, they are not allowed to learn combat skills beyond the 4th fang. This is an internal policy of the family to ensure that the pawns intended to be hunting dogs cannot threaten the descendants of the family, those who hold Viker as their master. Suddenly, Viker noticed an ancient tome locked with a huge chain. He thought to himself, is this it? Holding the key in his hand, he was still in disbelief that Hugo had actually suggested a 9th fang technique for him. If it had been before the rewind, even in my wildest dreams, I wouldn't have imagined having this opportunity. The sound of the key clicking into the lock echoed. Viker paid no more mind to his doubts. Well, I'm sure Hugo has given me permission. He probably thinks it's impossible for an 8-year-old to memorize this in just a day. Determined, Viker opened the tome to read, reflecting, but before the rewind, I studied the theories and assumptions behind the techniques from the 1st to the 4th form like a madman. I even began to predict the theories behind the 5th fang, which I had never learned before. After mapping out the 4th fang, I had once disrupted the mana connection. That's why I wasn't able to use the 5th fang. Viker described the swordsmanship of the Baskerville clan like this. Every level is categorized by the number of fangs. Level 1 has 1 fang, level 2 has 2 fangs. This is uniquely characterized by a dark red aura running along the blade when the fangs appear. Viker quickly flipped through the pages of the book, excitedly saying, I'm not interested in the Styx fang. I came here today with a different goal. What I want is a level even higher than that. Before long, Viker stepped outside and unexpectedly encountered 2 guards. Oh, is that you, young Master Viker? Have you already left? The 2 asked enthusiastically. There are still many holy texts about swordsmanship here. One of the guards added, if you're planning to leave to grab something you forgot, please let us go get it for you. Viker simply replied, I'm done here. One guard cheerfully remarked, done already? You could still read a bit more before leaving. Viker gently urged them to go back to their duties. I plan to skim through a few more holy texts before I leave, so you can just ignore me and get back to work. As Viker turned his back and headed up the stairs, he could still hear the 2 of them whispering. There was nothing in that corner except a few random, dusty old scriptures. If it were me, I'd read the books tucked away deeper inside. Doesn't he realize their value because he's still so young? Viker didn't care and kept walking, thinking to himself, think what you want. In his mind, he scoffed at the 2 of them. There's no way you would know that among those dusty, random scriptures lies a treasure waiting to be uncovered. Viker walked along the bookshelves, his eyes scanning constantly. Suddenly, he stopped, startled. He had found what he was looking for. He exclaimed excitedly, about it, lurking ambush. Viker was certain there was no mistake. Lurking ambush. That's it. I'm sure of it. He held the book in his hands, contemplating. This is a simple scripture about the 1st fang, one that even the children of the Baskerville family wouldn't bother to read. That's because all the pages in the middle have been torn out. No wonder it's considered lowly and irrelevant. Viker's expression quickly changed, and he became extremely excited. However, I discovered the true value of this book. Viker recalled an old story. Before the rewind, the hunting team I was part of found a strange artifact located on the border of the La Rouge at Lenore Mountain. Inside the box was a single sheet of paper from a book. It was a page about swordsmanship, torn from a holy script. The image of Hugo, demanding everyone search for this book, flashed in Viker's memory. That sheet came from a sacred text. The holy script was written in the handwriting of the Baskerville family. Sensing something was off, Hugo insisted that everyone find the book among the entire 1,000 library holy books. Viker was deeply engrossed in reading while simultaneously sorting through the events in his mind. That book is a sacred text on sword techniques called Lurking Ambush. This holy text was written by an ancestor of the Baskerville family, detailing how to achieve the 10th fang of the Baskerville clan. Obsessed with thoughts of the 10 fang, Hugo unleashed the hunting dogs of the family to track down the remaining 6 pages. Knowing that the remaining pages were carefully hidden among 7 other powerful clans, Hugo almost declared war on them, unleashing his hunting dogs to attack anyone who dared to resist. The image of Viker in his past life, battered from countless fierce battles, yet somehow surviving, filled Viker with rage. After sacrificing countless lives of those hunting dogs, we finally found the remaining pages and presented them to Hugo. And the reward for all of this was, as Hugo coldly acknowledged, an expression on his face that was completely unusual. Good. Viker cursed himself. What a foolish life it truly is. Because of this, Hugo moved past the 7 fang and reached the 9th, using the blood and flesh of the hunting dogs as his stepping stones. But in this life, that wouldn't happen. Viker, burning with anger, recalled, "It was me who hunted down and gathered all those pages. I still clearly remember the information on the lost pages. But the reason I couldn't advance beyond the 4th fang is that I have never touched the sacred book containing the original texts. The first step of the 10th fang is similar to the essence found within the 1st fang. At the moment someone shows their aggression by drawing their sword and creating a curve with the blade, every sword strike ends with the same limitation." Hugo clicked his tongue in surprise. No wonder most people treat this book like it's inferior, full of nonsense. Viker seemed to realize just how unique this technique was, but when the lost items were returned to their places, the information, which seemed just to be boastful fabrications, turned into a puzzle, each detail contributing to a beautiful masterpiece. Viker calmly considered, "I'm at the 4th fang level in swordsmanship, and I'm among the top graduates of Aura Swordsman. I'll become as strong as I was before I rewound time to when I was 15. The golden moonlight streamed through the vaulted window above. It was still the same frame, but the dawn had changed the color of the sky. Viker remained focused, reading Lurking Ambush all night long. Finally, he closed the book and told himself, "That's enough for now." Looking at the brightening sky, he confidently said, "I've concentrated all day, right? Thanks to that, I know this book so well I could read it backward." He stood up and glanced towards the front door. He felt no presence of the guards. Then he shut his eyes, determination surging within him. "I may not reach the 10th fang with this young body, but I can definitely achieve the 5th fang, something I couldn't touch in my past life." Viker sank into a quiet state, raising his right hand in a sword stance, imagining an enemy in front of him. Aura quickly flowed into his arm, transforming it into a sword. In a flash, Viker sliced through the 1st fang of the Baskerville clan. He smoothly executed the moves for the 2nd and 3rd fangs, his spirits soaring as he imagined his foe being completely shattered with every strike. The 4th fang. Viker gritted his teeth, the aura of intimidation rising intensely around him. Before the rewind, he had lived a shallow life. He could have earned the title of high-ranking swordmaster through hard work, but he was looked down upon by his own clan because he couldn't master the right sword techniques. The only reason he couldn't reach the 5th fang or rise to higher ranks was that he was a bastard. Viker's determination to change his fate surged with every lethal sword strike. He would not live that life again. The image of the enemy he had imagined for training now transformed into the face of Hugo the Baskerville, the greedy tyrant. Viker's strike shredded Hugo into unrecognizable pieces. With a powerful finish to his technique, Viker pulled back his aura and landed, catching his breath. Each gasping breath couldn't suppress his excitement. He had almost perfected the 5th fang. Viker smiled joyfully, celebrating his achievement. A warm feeling blossomed deep within him, a feeling of overwhelming emotion. Viker nearly cried, tears of joy streaming down his face as he reached the 5th fang. Viker looked around, puzzled. Is there really no sword nearby? Fate was slowly shifting, and the prejudices that had long existed were gradually being erased throughout the history of the Baskerville family. The fangs of a young wolf were growing faster than ever, and those very fangs were aimed at the throat of their own master. In past life, this young man had been the loyal hunting dog of the Baskerville family. However, the reward he received for faithfully completing his tasks was a death sentence ordered by the very master he served. In this life, he would take down everyone who would trample on him, especially the one who caused him all this suffering. Currently, Viker was just an 8-year-old boy standing in the most crucial secret library of the family. After a few minutes, Viker left the deepest part of the library, realizing that although it contained many advanced secrets, he didn't need to use them just yet. Instead, he chose to head to the side area, where books deemed chaotic and useless were kept. Standing in the aisle filled with high bookshelves, Viker reminded himself, I have successfully cultivated my 5th fang. If I can enhance my mana now, I will reach a milestone in strength before I rewind. Looking at his still immature hands, he thought to himself, my mana is steadily increasing. This time, through enlightenment, it will grow in multiple dimensions. The flow of liquefied aura is a sign of a swordsman. It seems that I have advanced from a high-level elite swordsman to a low-level swordsman. a rank I wouldn't have achieved until I was 30 in my previous life. Yet now I've reached it at just 8 years old. It's important to understand that being a swordsman is a completely different level compared to an elite swordsman. Thanks to the aura, intake a liquid form, increasing the density of the aura and allowing for fewer limitations in transformation. Viker also realizes in this life that his swordsmanship has improved compared to what he used before his reincarnation. This new sword technique won't stop at the 5th state. It can even reach the 10th fang. It holds limitless potential. He recalls his past combat experiences where he faced enemies head-on. The energy he accumulated from his previous training will make him stronger, but it limits his growth. In contrast, lurking ambush is a perfect sword technique that blends both offense and defense without any growth limits. If he focuses on learning it, he could even stand up against a mid-level swordsman. Viker gently placed the book on the windowsill. The sun-like streaming illuminated the book just like a torch lighting his current path. He continued to immerse himself in thought. I will have a 100% chance of winning if I assassinate, 50% if I confront directly. The question is, how much should I reveal to Hugo? Remembering the cold, expressionless man sitting at the head of the table only fueled Viker's desire for revenge. He took out the magnifying glass he had prepared earlier and quickly positioned it just right, allowing the sun's rays to beam through and ignite the book beneath. Watching the pages gradually burn away in the heat of the flames, Viker couldn't help but smirk. With this, Hugo and his pack of hounds can forget about reaching the 10th year. Of course, except for me. Suddenly, he heard a noise from outside. 2 guards unexpectedly walked in and one of them asked, "What's that smell?" "Young Master Viker, what have you done?" At that moment, Viker feigned a look of innocence. He scratched his head with a hint of concern in his eyes. "I'm sorry, I accidentally burned the book because I carelessly left the magnifying glass on top. I'll go see the steward if I need to report this." The 2 guards felt relieved and smiled, trying to comfort him. "Oh, young master, you don't need to feel guilty about this. It's our fault for not paying enough attention to you, young master. Besides, luckily, only 1 book got burned." Viker agreed, right? There were too many disorganized books anyway. Then he quickly steered the conversation in a different direction. He asked, "Are the knights busy dealing with a conflict with the Morger family over at the gemstone mine? You guys probably don't have time to worry about something small like this. So let's just pretend this never happened." The 2 soldiers were very pleased to hear that. Noticing their reaction, Viker swiftly moved past them toward the door. "So let's keep this between us. I know you must be very busy. I apologize for wasting your time." Once Viker's figure disappeared around the corner, one of the guards exclaimed, "Young Master Viker really is a good person, isn't he?" The other person replied, "Yes, they even think about the feelings of servants like us. Truly, a master worth respecting." Viker walked down the long hallway of the mansion and returned to the private room of the homeowner. Hugo and the steward were waiting for him there. As soon as he entered, Hugo asked, "So, did you achieve some enlightenment?" Seeing his affirmative response, Hugo's face lit up with satisfaction. He continued to probe, "What did you sense and realize in the library?" Viker pretended to scratch his chin, his gaze recalling something. He answered accurately and sharply, yet softly like ocean waves. "I feel like there's something similar." His response startled both men. The steward couldn't help but exclaim, "Could it be aura?" You must understand that aura is proof that someone has truly stepped into the world of swordsmanship. Even the most talented individuals need to be at least 15 years old to reach the level of a skilled swordsman. Hugo was briefly taken aback, but quickly regained his composure. He thought to himself, "What am I thinking? The boy is only 8 years old." To be more certain, Hugo suggested, "Can you show this father what you just said?" Receiving an immediate response from Viker without hesitation, a fighting arena was swiftly prepared. While the other young masters looked on in confusion, the butler beside Hugo couldn't stop worrying. This time it seemed like Hugo just wanted to test Viker's strength. He explained to Barrymore, "I'll just summon a monster that matches his level." Before the butler could fully grasp the situation, the arena's door swung open. A starred orc monster suddenly appeared, its eyes glowing red and drool dripping from its mouth. This was a C-rank beast, but it was enough to make the kids in the stands gasp in shock. Wasn't it a bit too much to let an 8-year-old fight an orc? Usually, it took until around age 15 to be strong enough for this. "Father, if anything happens, I'm sure the knights will step in," Viker said confidently. At Hugo's command, the chains binding the monster were released. It instantly charged towards Viker, eager for a taste of the feast before it. Viker, on the other hand, remained incredibly calm. He assumed the standard fighting stance with his sword and, in an impressively quick motion, severed one of the orc's arms. The crowd watching was stunned by the scene. No one could quite grasp how he had acted so fast. The orc was in pain, but before it could recover, Viker unleashed a flurry of attacks, inflicting numerous wounds on the beast's body. Seeing the orc writhing in agony on the ground, Viker thought to himself, It's in shock from seeing its own blood for the first time. Ah, orcs had a rare regeneration ability, but it wasn't activated, so there was no way a rank C creature could stand up to a rank B creature like Hemor's Hellhound. While the kids were still buzzing with confusion, Viker noticed Hugo's contemplative expression. He thought, he's probably realizing I haven't shown him what I discovered in the library yet. Well, I'll show him what he wants. Suddenly, Hugo's gaze turned icy, and the butler beside him cried out in fear. So it's true. Viker in the arena successfully activated his aura. The creature had barely risen when, unexpectedly, a sword tore through its body. Viker's agility made it impossible for the creature to dodge, resulting in its immediate death. Hugo in the stands couldn't maintain his composure. Barrymore carefully adjusted his glasses and said to him, "That's the aura of a low-level elite warrior. Congratulations, master of the house. An extraordinary talent of this generation has emerged. Even if you searched through all the families in the Empire, you would never find a talent like this." Hugo was not quick to agree. He replied, "Look closely. There's something strange about that orc. Its special ability is super regeneration, but this orc keeps bleeding." The kid only won because that orc was already weakened. The butler beside him didn't argue, only thinking to himself, can't he just be happy for once? Suddenly, Viker in the arena spoke up. With a bright, innocent smile, he asked Hugo, "Dad, is there anything stronger than that orc?" After easily defeating the orc, Viker continued to engage with enthusiasm. He used his innocent face, flashing a bright smile as he said to Hugo, "Dad, is there a monster stronger than the orc?" He didn't mind the whispers from the crowd in the stands. He thought it would be best to show just enough of his power. If he was lucky, his achievements would be recognized, and he might get a chance to separate from Hugo. He could be sent to the wild or recruited into an academy, for example. Hugo heard his suggestion, and his eyes lit up with interest. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl into a smirk. "It seems the orcs we've had to go so far to capture still aren't enough to satisfy my son's hunger for battle. What Viker said makes sense. The boy still needs to experience real combat." The steward seemed to recall that they had captured something during their recent conquest of the savages for testing. Barrymore, standing beside him, slowly spoke up, "Yes, that's right. There's still one left. It seems quite sensitive since it hasn't been fed for a long time." At Hugo's command, someone quickly brought out a new monster. Its appearance immediately sent shockwaves through the crowd. Viker's eyes sparkled with excitement as he gazed at the massive creature before him. He said, "It's a troll." Although the troll was still shackled by heavy chains, it didn't hesitate to growl, exuding a powerful aura against its opponent. Viker felt a rush of enthusiasm, and his gaze was glued to the monster. He turned to Hugo and asked, "Father, can I start right away?" Receiving permission, Viker leaped into the air and dashed straight toward the beast. The troll, refusing to remain passive, raised its enormous arm, ready to counterattack. However, Viker managed to evade the blow. Clutching his sword, a hint of frustration crossed his face as he quickly created some distance from the creature. The spectators in the stands were puzzled. Why didn't he attack when he had the chance? Only Hugo, with his keen eyes, understood Viker's strategy. He praised, "Good decision. The troll has remarkable healing abilities. If you can't deliver a fatal blow in one strike, you're just wasting energy. So if you want to hunt a troll, you need a solid strategy." Seeing his flexibility in action, the crowd murmured among themselves. He dodged every attack. Is he really trying to fight that troll? Can an 8-year-old have such judgment? So this is a true genius, huh? Viker, however, wasn't as comfortable in the arena as he had been in the previous match. His face was smeared with dirt and sweat poured down continuously. He thought to himself, "This thing is pretty slow, so I don't feel too pressured, but I need to put on a good show. I could easily take down a troll like this if I revealed my real strength, but that would just complicate things. I need to eliminate it as naturally as possible. The best way would be to use the troll's own force against it when it attacks." Thinking this when the beast made its next move, Viker quickly seized the opportunity and swung his sword, cutting off the monster's hand. The crowd began to murmur again. The troll got sliced, but it'll just heal right away unless that was a decisive blow. Just as I thought, you can't kill a troll with just the first slice in Baskerville's sword technique. But for an 8-year-old to pull this off is still impressive. Viker agreed with this statement. It was indeed impossible to cut through the thick skin of the troll with the first fang. If he continuously used Beelzebub's skill that drained health, the troll would die in no time. But that would feel pointless. Hugo, watching from the stands, suddenly spoke up, "You can stop now. If you keep going, it could get really dangerous, so..." Before the old man could finish, Viker interrupted him. "I'm almost there. I think if I fight a little longer, I'll realize something. If I can't defeat it in the next move, I'll give up the battle." Hugo saw the determination in Viker's eyes. For a moment, the old man seemed thoughtful, then he quickly nodded in agreement. Viker began to cast his spell. The aura sword covered half his face, radiating a blood-red aura that spread around him, and his eyes glinted with a thirst for battle. How much strength should I reveal? He wondered. The answer was already clear. He wanted others to see the vision of himself awakening and leveling up during the fight. He eagerly anticipated Hugo's reaction when he witnessed this death blow. Sure enough, he succeeded in defeating the troll in the next move, under the astonished gazes of everyone present. In the Baskerville swordsmanship clan, Crimson Iron Blade, a person's life typically follows a formula. Around the age of 15, they can channel mana into a sword. At that point, most hunters quickly learn the first strategy of the Baskerville technique. But for the first time in the history of the Baskerville clan, an 8-year-old child received what his siblings got when they were 18. A second fang, an extraordinary being, was born. Looking at Viker awkwardly, he said, "I accidentally won." Hugo's face suddenly stiffened. What did we just witness? A week later, in the shared dining hall, Viker sat with a bowl of terrible food in front of him. No matter how many times he ate it, he just couldn't get used to that random stew. He noticed the people around him, but wherever his gaze fell, they would instinctively back away. They had started to keep their distance from him since that day. I guess this is normal in Baskerville, where strength is everything, right? He recalled the chaotic scene from that day, unable to resist a slight grin. Watching Hugo in a panic was truly a sight to behold. Overall, the strength he displayed openly was only at the second year of Baskerville, which was just the power of a mid-ranking scholar. His real strength was at the 5th rank of Baskerville, pretty weak, roughly comparable to that of a lower-level sorcerer. If he included the skills of his familiar, he would definitely be stronger than a typical senior swordsman. While he was lost in thought, 3 figures suddenly approached from behind. Viker instinctively sensed their presence. It turned out to be the 3 brothers from the Boro family. This left him puzzled. Instinctively, he thought, what do these guys want now? He coldly asked them, "Have I gone too easy on you in the past?" As soon as he said this, the 3 of them showed a look of panic. Hybro quickly spoke up, No, that's not it. We just wanted to say you looked really cool when you took down that orc and troll." At that moment, he spat out all the food in his mouth. He couldn't believe that the 3 who had once bullied him were saying something so ridiculous. What's going on? Are they trying to play both sides here, or are they trying to trick me? Getting goosebumps isn't fun at all. Maybe I should just hit them first and think later. As Hugo was filled with rage, Baron Moore suddenly appeared. He informed him, "Mr. Viker, you need to meet with the head of the family right away." Night was falling over the Baskerville estate. A carriage with horses approached from an unknown direction. The Morgan family crest fluttered in the wind, signaling the identity of the guest. In the meeting room, a white-haired man dressed in the blue and white uniform typical of the Morgan family greeted him. "Hugo, long time no see. You still look the same, sir." It turned out he was the deputy of the Morgan family, Adolph Moore. The 2 powerful men from rival families began discussing business. Adolph started, "I hope this year's annual event won't end with too many issues." Hugo crossed his arms and replied casually, "Yeah, the joint training this time ended without too many incidents." "Is that so?" Adolph firmly disagreed. "Last year, both families had members seriously injured, didn't they? If that's not a problem, then what exactly is?" Hugo was immediately irritated and said, "It's just a small scratch, and you're calling it grave injury. It seems like the Morgan family is exaggerating a bit too much." Adolph shot back, "That's because the Morgan family is prestigious and refined." The room fell silent. 2 auras, one green belonging to the mage and one red belonging to the swordsman, began to spread and flare up intensely. Initially, these 2 families didn't have such a serious conflict. Magic and swordsmanship were meant to complement each other, as stated by the Emperor 2 generations ago. According to the Emperor, the Baskerville and Morgan families had started joint training. Only children aged 8 to 10 could participate. The annual event for the 2 families had begun in a very good atmosphere. However, at some point, a dispute arose. A claim over a ruby mine in the territory between the Baskerville and Morgan families surfaced, causing tensions between the 2 family leaders. Nonetheless, due to the Emperor's orders, the joint training had to continue. So instead of the head of the Morgan family, his younger brother began to meet with the Baskerville family, represented by Viker, the Vice clan leader. Adolph suddenly changed the subject, saying, "Oh, right, I hear there's a rising star in the Baskerville family. A once-in-a-century genius from the Baskervilles would be a tremendous blessing for the Empire." Hugo closed his eyes, ignoring him, and coldly replied, "This isn't something you should focus on." However, Hugo's reaction made Adolph pause and think, this guy actually reacted to praise about his kid? That's rare. Thinking this, Adolph continued, "We can call this a double fortune. There's also a genius emerging from my Morgan family." After speaking, he glanced toward the door, his tone softening. "Come on in, Camas, and say hello." The heavy door creaked open, revealing a young woman stepping in. She walked with confidence, her back straight and her presence undeniable. When the young girl stepped further into the room, Hugo could clearly see her breathtaking beauty, marked by her crimson pupils and vibrant red hair tied back on either side. Though her eyes shared the same color as the Baskerville family, it was hard to say they resembled each other. Camas's red pupils gleamed with passion, radiating the brightness of sunlight, unlike the deep red associated with the stench of blood that characterized the Baskervilles. Adolphe affectionately placed his hand on her shoulder and introduced her, saying, "This is my niece Camas." After that, he turned to her and gently said, "You should greet our host, my dear." Camas seemed pensive for a moment, then spoke up, "Excuse me, are you the thief who stole our ruby ore?" With that, she boldly extended her hand toward Hugo. "Please return it to us, the ruby ore." Her expression gradually shifted to anger, the red of her pupils intensifying. The old man countered, "Thief. Me." Adolphe looked at his niece, startled, unable to stop her from speaking. The old man, flustered, asked, "What on earth is the girl talking about?" Camas calmly replied, "Well, uncle, you said that despicable ruffian stole our ruby ore like a common thief." The old man grew more and more puzzled. "When did I say that?" The girl continued, "In the carriage before I got out, about 1 hour and 42 minutes ago." Hugo's expression became increasingly grim. He clenched his teeth and asked again, "A pathetic guy like that, like a thief?" Adolphe quickly tried to clarify, "Wait a minute, it seems there's been some misunderstanding here." But Hugo, feeling bored, ignored Adolphe's words and coldly retorted, "What does a little wild puppy know? You don't need to try to defend the Morgan family's teaching prowess to me." Suddenly, Camas shouted, "Give me back the ruby. I can't continue my research without it." Adolphe, wanting to calm down his granddaughter, fell helpless. In the end, Hugo could no longer hold back. He roared, "Enough already." After that, he looked at the two of them and said, "It seems the Morgan family doesn't teach their kids anything about manners, huh?" Adolphe felt uncomfortable but still firmly defended his granddaughter. He pulled the little girl close to him and responded, "What are you talking to a child about?" He noticed the furious expression on Hugo's face and continued, "Is the holy sword of the Empire going to bully an 8-year-old girl?" Suddenly, a voice rang out from behind. "I guess the Morgan family teaches their children not to be greedy for what belongs to others, right?" All three people in the room turned to see who had just arrived. It was Viker. The steward behind him calmly greeted and announced, "Sir, I have brought young Master Viker." Adolphe glanced at him, wondering, is this kid the rising star of the Baskerville family? Unexpectedly, he noticed the empty space beside him and realized Camas had slipped out of his grasp without him noticing. She quickly rushed over to Viker and asked, "Hey, what did you just say?" Viker jumped at her sudden movement, standing face to face with Camas, thinking to himself, "Camas, no way." Seeing him standing there in silence, Camas crossed her arms and shouted, "What's with that disgusting expression?" As Viker looked at the girl yelling at him, he found it hard to believe. The queen of the Morgan family. Could this really be the young Camas Morgan? He remembered his past life and how she appeared as an adult exuding a commanding presence. Even among countless powerful wizards from prestigious magical families, she was called a genius among geniuses. At the peak of her power, she single-handedly conquered all the monsters and barbarians of Mount Leru Eleno. The way she burned and reduced them to blood and dust had spread far and wide. His gaze became intrigued. Furthermore, her stunning beauty captivated the elite, allowing her to manipulate the royal family to the extent that she was regarded as a representative of the government. Watching the fiery girl questioning him about the ruby mine, Viker thought silently, but this is a far-off story of the future. Right now, she's just an 8-year-old child. His tone turned cold as he spoke. "You made quite the effort just to come here and cause a ruckus like a child, didn't you?" His words caught the attention of both Adolphe and Hugo. Camas was really irritated by Viker. Her whole body was engulfed in flames and her tone was fierce. "Did you just say I'm making a fuss?" Viker calmly replied, "That's right, you're making a fuss right now." The atmosphere around Camas suddenly changed. The burning heat of the flames shifted to the biting cold of ice and snow. She raised her hands, forming 2 magic circles, and said to Viker, "That I'll teach you why that ruby ore belongs to the Morgan family in a way even someone as foolish as you can understand." Viker stood there relaxed, thinking, this looks interesting. A moment later, Camas had created an ice structure that delighted Adolphe. She confidently pointed at her creation and said, "Now I'll try to explain it so that an idiot like you can get it." Viker remained silent, thinking to himself, "An ice model, huh? I thought we were going to fight or something." Camas began the explanation, pointing to a deep cave on the model. She said, "First, this is the border between the Morgan family and the Baskerville family, also known as the shared security area. You must know that high-quality ruby is produced here, right? On the ice model, the territory between the two families was clearly defined. The issue was that the entrance to this mine was located on the Moore family's land, while the underground mine itself was within the Baskerville territory. Camas's voice was pleasant as she continued, "As you can see, the structure of the mine prevents the Baskervilles from extracting the ruby themselves. That means the ruby should belong to us." The Adolph family listened to their niece's analysis with growing interest. Meanwhile, Hugo's expression darkened further. Camas continued her argument. "However, your family believes that we have encroached on your territory and interfered with our mining operations. Furthermore, you also refused our request to lease the related territory." At this point, Viker nodded in agreement. The mineral known as ruby is often used as a magical ingredient, and the Baskervilles really don't need to rely on the ruby being mined. Hearing this, Camas responded with delight. But before she could enjoy her excitement for too long, Viker suddenly changed his attitude. He said, "Wait, are you renting the territory?" It seemed that the biggest tragedy for them was that no one in Baskerville was foolish enough to rent out their land just to get a little pocket money. Camas angrily shouted, "What? You said your family has no interest in the ruby." Viker replied casually, "That's right, we're only interested in the territory, and that's why we advised you not to trespass." Seeing Camas's furious expression, Viker became even more provocative. "Anyway, the ones who are upset about not having that pile of rubies are you, right?" At this point, Camas was determined to prove him wrong. She shouted back at Viker, "Fine, we'll show you exactly why we have a rightful claim to those rubies." With that, she pointed directly at the model and said, "This is your family's land, and this side is my family's land." Then she started to stretch her hand forward, her gaze becoming mocking. "So now, whose hand is this?" Viker chuckled softly at her actions. He said, "So you're asking whose hands you'll belong to when yours reach into our territory." After finishing his sentence, he grabbed Camas's hand and added, "Of course they'll belong to me." His action surprised her, causing her cheeks to flush with embarrassment. Camas protested, "What are you talking about? How could I belong to you? You're being ridiculous." Viker coldly replied to Camas's words, "Who said you belong to me?" At the same time, he swiftly pulled a knife from his belt, despite Adolph and Hugo casting warning glances. Viker continued to stare coldly at Camas and said, "I said your hand belongs to me." In disbelief, Adolph and Barrymore exchanged looks, and Viker showed a sinister grin as he told Camas, "I'll cut off your hand, you know." Camas' expression changed, and she asked in disbelief, "What?" Just then, Viker quickly pulled out the knife, raising Camas' hand high with the blade dangerously close to her wrist. This was the first time Camas found herself in such a situation, and she could only scream in despair. She cried out, "Help me, uncle." Suddenly, Adolph appeared right behind the boy. His expression was dark as he said, "Fool, stay away from my granddaughter." Viker sensed the danger and loosened her grip on Camas. Seizing the moment, she dove into Adolph's arms and cried, "Uncle, he was going to chop my arm off." Seeing his beloved granddaughter scared, he turned and shouted at Hugo, "Marcus, what is going on here?" Hugo understood that Viker's actions were a bit too much this time. He spoke firmly to his son. "That's enough of that, son." Viker doesn't seem afraid at all. He smiled, playfully fiddling with the sword's blade as he said, "My bad." Slowly, he bent the blade with ease, explaining, "We just play like this at home." Adolph realized what was happening. A fake knife? What kind of toys do you let kids play with? Viker immediately bowed her head at him, apologizing. "I just meant to tease him a little. I didn't expect him to cry. I'm sorry. Sir, children in the Baskerville family have played with toys like this since they were little." Adolph was surprised and repeated, "You can joke like that." Hugo, sitting beside him, commented, "They're just kids playing around. Don't you think you're overreacting a bit?" Chief Moore finished speaking and gestured for Adolph to sit down. "I have a few things to discuss with you about the ruby mine. I'm sure you want to sit down to talk about that, so let the kids sort it out themselves." Camas still tightly held her cousin, her eyes red and filled with tears, but she bravely told Viker, "You better watch out. I'm not going to let this go." Viker kept smiling, seemingly unconcerned by her threat. Meanwhile, at another location, numerous fighting arenas were lined up in a row. A crowd had gathered to watch and participate. The friendly match between the Baskerville family and the Moore family had begun. This was an occasion for children aged 8 to 10 to come together and compete. The 8-year-olds would engage in mana theory or mana sensing competitions, but most attention would be focused on the life or death matches among the 15-year-olds. However, the audience's gaze was fixed on one place during this year's exhibition match. The renowned Moore family of mages, specifically Camas Moore. She appeared with a confident demeanor, her intense gaze locked on her opponent. On the other side stood Crimson Iron Blade, the Baskerville clan, with Viker Van Baskerville. Two 8-year-olds faced each other on the arena. At the request of the Moore clan members, the match between the two prodigies from rival families would follow real combat training rules. Camas focused her attention on Viker and said, "Get ready. When I'm set, I won't hold back. With that, she created a magic circle, her lips chanting ancient incantations. Seeing her technique, the more clan members in the stands gasped. Is this the four realms of magic? Adolf, observing from above, felt a sense of pride. He stroked his short beard and turned to Hugo, saying, I thought you could only cast magic suited for a 15-year-old, but casting 4 spells simultaneously truly shows why she is the talented mage of the Morg family. Hugo sat there in silence, not bothering to respond. Below him, Camas couldn't hold back any longer and launched her attack. She waved her hand, and a series of spells from different elements raced toward Viker. However, with his quick reflexes, Viker easily dodged them without breaking a sweat. His hair flew in the wind as he said, Your spells are pretty flashy. It would be better if you channeled your energy into one solid spell to attack, don't you think? Hearing this, Camas grew angry. She continued casting spells, retorting, Why should I take advice from you? You're just a fool who knows nothing about magic. With Viker approaching closer, Camas quickly raised a wall of sand to block him, but he shattered it effortlessly. He said, A fool, huh? That's a bit hurtful to hear. Camas startled at his words, thinking, he broke through that wall so easily. Is this the power of the Baskerville clan being immersed in the river Styx? Camas closed her eyes and told herself, I was careless. Yet she didn't feel any pain in her body. When she couldn't hold back any longer and opened her eyes, she was shocked to see Viker's hand in front of her. He calmly snapped his fingers, hitting her right on the forehead, making her body fly backward. Adolf jumped and shouted, A finger snap? Hugo, beside him, remained quiet, but couldn't help a small smile creeping onto his lips. Camas glared angrily at Viker, one hand pressing against her sore forehead. She yelled back, Why did you snap my forehead? Are you taking it easy on me just because I'm a girl? I won't let this go. Viker ruffled his hair, teasing her. You've got a bump on your forehead now. He looked at her, tears welling in her eyes, and suggested, Let's call it quits before anything unexpected happens. Camas's face showed her reluctance, and she quickly sprang into action, creating 2 layers of sand walls right next to each other. Standing on the other side of the sand barriers, Viker could still hear her cheerful laughter. Ha ha, now there are 2 layers. Let's see how you get through this. Upon hearing this, he was at a loss for words and thought to himself, what good does this do? I could just go around to get to her. However, out of respect for his opponent, Viker decided to break through both layers of Camas's defense. All right then, if you like it, I'll indulge you, he thought. With a loud crash, Camas watched as his hand easily passed through 2 walls, heading straight for her. On the other side, Viker smirked at the girl who was startled and began to tease her, saying, Now I have a question for you. Whose hand just went through the wall? Camas was taken aback, not quite catching his meaning when suddenly Viker flicked her forehead, adding, The answer is the hand of the stronger one. Camas stumbled and fell flat on the ground, screaming, I'll kill you. Viker quickly dodged her attack, marveling to himself, I can't believe it. She's still going at it. Kids nowadays are so stubborn. As he watched Camas fuming and attacking, Viker thought, even though I could easily break her neck in 0.1 seconds, doing that would cause trouble. I wonder what I should do to help her calm down. He glanced toward the arena behind him and came up with an idea. It would be better to let someone else handle it. In the adjacent arena, an intense battle was unfolding between members of the Morg and Baskerville clans. A member of the Baskerville clan scoffed, What kind of weak magic is that? I'll slice through all of your spells. Viker also paid attention to the action in the arena. The foolish wizard kept casting spells repeatedly, while the warrior didn't seem much smarter, just hacking away at the spells. Viker thought, I can take advantage of those 2 fools. Camas noticed that Viker was avoiding the fight and shouted, Why do you keep dodging? Don't mess around, don't run away. Fight properly. Camas was so focused on chasing Viker that he missed what was happening next door in the arena. The wizard from the Morg clan was pushed to the edge and angrily said to his opponent, If you're so good, try cutting through this move. Seeing that, Viker realized it was the perfect opportunity. He lured Camas closer to the edge of the arena. Then, when the wizard from the adjacent arena launched his attack, Viker quickly jumped aside to dodge it and teased, Camas, better get ready with a defense spell. Camas jumped as she saw the bright flame of magic blazing behind Viker. Adolf and Hugo in the stands were equally shocked, not expecting this to happen. As they looked at the roaring fire beneath the arena, the crowd gathered around couldn't help but exclaim, Oh no, Camas! Adolf yelled angrily, Camas! In the thick smoke, Camas Morg sat there calmly thinking, Is that your voice? What should I do now? She glanced down at her body, which was now lacking its protective gear, and reflected, I managed to avoid getting hurt with the defensive spell, but the magic has burned away all my clothes. Camas could only wrap her arms tightly around herself, her eyes brimming with tears. It's just the smoke. They still don't know what's happening to me. If everyone sees me when the smoke clears, they'll laugh at me and make me die of embarrassment. While she silently pleaded, "Someone please help me." Suddenly, Viker appeared through the haze. He threw his jacket over her shoulders and said, "Put this on." Camas was surprised and asked, "Why are you defending your opponent?" Viker replied, "Well, I'm just going to take my jacket back." Camas tightened her grip on the jacket. "That's not what I meant, but then you won't have a jacket." Viker shrugged, not caring much, and said, "I don't really mind stuff like that." Camas' eyes widened in surprise, thinking, "Why does this idiot care about me?" Then she suddenly pointed out, "Hey, your hand is bleeding." Seeing this, Viker thought a scratch from the river Styx, that jerk of a swordsman, must have added some aura to it. As the smoke cleared, everyone around could see the scene inside more clearly. Adolf let a sigh of relief, saying, "It's still safe, thank God." The group of onlookers began to discuss, Lady Morgue is sitting on the floor, but it's the Baskerville kid who's bleeding. Another person chimed in, "It's hard to figure out who the winner is." They looked at Viker's muscular build in awe, but just look at his physique, he must owe it to the river Styx. Just by looking at those muscles, it was clear how hard he must train. An 8-year-old genius, huh? On this side, Camas was being hugged tightly by his uncle, despite the fact that the person he cherished was on the verge of tears. Her gaze was still fixed on Viker, deep in thought. Inside the Baskerville castle, Hugo and Viker had changed into formal attire and were walking together. Hugo asked, "So how was the battle with the lady from the Morgue clan?" Hugo didn't look at him, but he would guess Viker's indifferent expression. It was quite interesting. I understood the significance of this event once again. Hearing this, Hugo continued, "A fight with a sorcerer is very different from a fight with a swordsman." Looking at his 8-year-old son, Hugo couldn't help but ask, "So why didn't you finish it?" Viker responded casually, "I felt a bit confused facing a lady." His eyes turned cold as he heard that. He said, "Lowering your guard in a battle will leave you injured. Take that injury as a lesson for the future." Viker, startled by this, thought to himself, "Is Hugo worried about me?" He remembered the cold, bloodthirsty look on that man's face from the past. When he was younger, he didn't remember much about Hugo. The man was always indifferent, irritable, and very violent. People often said that his terrible personality was because he had lost his wife and eldest daughter. Still, that wasn't his business. The two of them continued walking side by side down the long hallway. Hugo spoke up again and asked him, "What do you think we should do about our ruby mine?" Viker expressed his thoughts directly. "I think we should get rid of it." Hugo asked, "Get rid of our control over the ruby mine? Why do you think that?" At this point, Viker slowly explained himself. The main goal of the Baskerville family is to establish a large territory. Our ruby mine is located at the base of the Le Rouge at Lenoir Mountain. The monsters and barbarians there are a major obstacle for us. He continued, "If we skillfully mobilize the Ma family, we can minimize the damage in our efforts to develop that land." Hugo agreed, saying, "That's true." Not stopping there, he continued to share his thoughts and painted a vision of what could likely happen in the future. Once the Morgue family takes control of the ruby mine, they will leave people in that area. All we need to do is push the monsters and barbarians to attack that region, and then we just need to. Hugo's expression turned enigmatic. He stroked his chin and thought, "Ruby will be bathed in the blood of our enemies. If that happens, the Morgue family will think twice before daring to step into our territory." After saying this, he ran his hand through Viker's thick hair and complimented him. "Your thoughts align with mine about 90%. Viker allowed him to play with his hair, secretly thinking, "Of course, that's how it will turn out since it was your idea from the start. I'm the one responsible for pushing those monsters and barbarians to attack them." While thinking this, he still said, "Well, we should be careful with the Morgue family." However, Hugo replied, "No need, I need people around this area." Suddenly, at a turn in the path, the two encountered a member of the Morgue family. Adolf remarked, "Here you are, Chief." Behind him, Camas was still sniffling, hiding behind his cousin in tattered clothes from the battle. Hugo and Viker felt puzzled when they heard Adolf's proposal. "Can we talk before I head back?" For some reason, when she heard her uncle say that, Camas' expression showed some confusion, and her cheeks flushed unusually. In the meeting room, Hugo sat back in his chair, arms crossed, and asked the old man, "Do you have something to say?" The elder replied politely, "I have something to discuss with you." He began, "We've been considering how we should resolve the ruby mine issue peacefully, as utilizing it might be one solution." Hugo looked a bit confused. "What? Because you've crossed into our territory." Adolf then spoke directly, "What do you think about a marriage alliance?" "A marriage alliance?" Adolf confirmed. "Yes, a marriage union between the Morgue and Baskerville families." While the two old men discussed this, Camas couldn't help but glance at Viker. However, it seemed he didn't notice. Hugo then asked, "Who is Adolf suggesting?" At that moment, Adolf rubbed his granddaughter's head and suggested, "What do you think about the eldest son of the Baskerville family and the daughter of the Morgue family, my dear?" He began to praise her, saying, "My granddaughter is a talented child. She has both looks and intelligence. She lacks nothing. I'm sure this child would be a perfect match for the genius of the Baskerville family. Hugo replied, my eldest son is 25 this year, so I don't think age will be an issue, right? After all, listening to what Adolf says, 20 years is only 17 years apart, which isn't that different after all. It's really not a problem. Suddenly, Camas spoke up, I won't accept anyone weaker than my mother. Adolf quickly tried to console her, saying, Camas, if you plan to marry someone stronger than your mother, you might end up single for life. Camas wouldn't listen to her uncle. She turned her head sharply, her demeanor firm, and said, that's my condition, and I don't like big age gaps. I want someone around my age or a little younger. Hugo, sitting on the other side, couldn't help but speak up. Kid, this isn't a buffet where people can just pick and choose. Camas, hearing this, immediately replied. Her gaze was steady, and as her hand touched her heart, she spoke solemnly, I know, and I don't intend to play game here. After saying this, her eyes subtly glanced toward Viker, who had been quietly standing in the corner. Viker, noticing her look, felt a bit confused. Adolf beside her also looked taken aback. Don't tell me. He quickly whispered into his grandmother's ear, this can't happen. That kid was an illegitimate child of the clan leader. No matter what happened, in the end, she would just be a small fish in a big pond. With his keen hearing, Hugo could easily catch what the old man said. His expression darkened. I'm getting fed up with this guy. At that moment, Hugo spoke up. The engagement is an important matter, and it's up to those involved to decide. Son, what are you thinking? Upon hearing Hugo's question, both Viker and Camas couldn't help but look at him with hopeful eyes. Viker hesitated for a moment, but then replied, I agree. His answer stunned both Adolf and Camas. Adolf's face darkened. What is this, you clever little rascal? Hugo said, isn't it the thoughts of the people involved that matter most in a betrothal? What you think, son? At that moment, Camas looked at Viker with hopeful eyes. He paused for a moment, then spoke up. Do you agree? His quick approval surprised both Camas and Adolf. The old man widened his eyes, thinking, what is this little mouse saying? He's saying he would agree if the conditions are what that gentleman requires. How dare he act so presumptuously in front of the only direct daughter of his family? On the other hand, Camas was thrilled, thinking, wait, does that mean he actually likes me? Is he the shy type? Hugo then chimed in, direct lineage and collateral branches mean nothing in Baskerville. Sometimes Lil produces inferior children, while Van can have truly remarkable ones. Adolf still couldn't believe it and asked, the clan leader thinks highly of him. Is he really that talented? Sure, here's the translation. Then the old man stood in front of Viker, pondering for a moment. Viker thought to himself, Adolf Morg, the sixth in line of the Morg family, is exceptionally powerful among the Morg clan leaders, a prestigious and renowned family known for their magic. He is also known as an uncle who always teases his niece in a foolish way. The old man leaned in closer and said in a warning tone, Kid, I don't tell you this every time, but just having talent isn't enough to be Camas's husband. Then he placed his hand on Viker. Viker thought silently, this arranged marriage is the clan's proposal, not my choice. Personally, I can't see any Baskerville child being suitable for Camas. However, Adolf had a different inclination in his mind. Why does this kid seem so mature? The old man chuckled and asked, why aren't you answering me? Are you even listening? Viker replied with a serious expression, I'm not listening because you said you weren't talking to me. The response caught the old man off guard. Camas looked over at him, equally surprised. She thought to herself, how can he be so bold in front of his uncle? Meanwhile, Hugo, sitting across from them, quietly laughed with pride. Adolf chuckled, then turned to Hugo. If you don't mind, Mr. Baskerville, may I have a private word with this child? Hugo responded with a hint of indifference. The great wizard of the Empire plans to interrogate an 8-year-old, does he? Upon hearing this, Adolf replied, oh no, this child will one day become my niece's husband. He continued, I make this request not as a representative of the Morg family, but as my niece's uncle. Camas quickly made a sign to object. Uncle, that's not how it is. Adolf turned to smile wickedly at his niece, saying, trust me, my dear, just stay quiet. Sometimes discussions like this are necessary. He then returned to the conversation. So what do you say, Mr. Baskerville? Hugo replied, fine then, if you're so insistent. In the arena, just outside the Grand Hall, Camas and Hugo stood rigidly, both watching the fighting platform. Adolf challenged, oh, child of Baskerville, I will test your abilities, so show me everything you've got. Viker replied, yes, I understand. In his heart, he thought, you'll fail if I show everything. The old man extended his hand and began to cast a spell. I will grant you a chance. A surge of earth erupted from below, and with a union of earth, fire, and water, a ceramic vase quickly took shape. At that moment, Camas was stunned. He's creating a vase, just as I expected from my uncle. He's skilled in fire, earth, and water magic. Then the ceramic vase filled with water was placed on Adolph's head. He laughed, pointing upward, and said, "I will face you with a vase full of water on my head. If you can make even a drop fall, then you win." Viker took his sword and stood opposite him, quietly contemplating. Adolph Morg is a very strong man. I can't even hope to match him in this rewind. This is an opportunity to experience a part of his power. He turned to Hugo again, thinking that Hugo would allow him to think the same way. What were his chances of winning if he faced him with all of his strength before kneeling? An assassination through an ambush would have a 50% chance, maybe only 10% in a direct confrontation. Adolph confidently called out, "Come here to me." Immediately, Viker sprang forward, not needing to fight with all of his strength. I just need to show enough to satisfy Hugo. It's time to test the skills of a great sorcerer. With his eyes flashing red, Viker lunged at Adolph with his sword. Camas suddenly let out a frustrated sound, her eyes and mouth wide open as she exclaimed, "You can't just charge in directly at my uncle." Her words surprised Viker, and he was instantly thrown back by a water shield. Adolph, behind the magical shield, laughed and said, "Why did you tell them that, my dear? That magic shield is the best counter against a swordsman." He continued, "This shield will be hard to break without a special aura." At that, Viker clicked his tongue. Adolph then switched to fire magic. He created meteor-like projectiles in the sky and exclaimed, "Now is the time for my attack." Instantly, the fiery projectile shot forth, and Viker quickly dodged to the side. Camas outside scolded him, "Uncle, that's a bit too much. You never used magic like that when you fought me." Adolph looked over and asked, "Camas, which side are you on right now?" Quickly feeling betrayed by his granddaughter, he turned and shouted, "You scoundrel, I will not forgive you." Meanwhile, Hugo thought to himself, his attacks are coming at an incredible speed, hard to dodge. Looks like I don't need to intervene. Let's see what this young hound will reveal against a great magician. Viker gazed up through the thick smoke and considered, is this the level of skill he possesses? In reality, I've rewound to the form of a 6-year-old, but I can use my combat experience from before the rewind. I might be able to lure him into dropping his guard. Viker whispered to himself, his face is cold as ice. I could even kill him. He quickly lunged forward, swinging his sword at Adolph's shield. Viker struck several times, while Adolph stood confidently, boldly stating it wouldn't change anything if he did that 100 times. Your sword can't break my shield. Ignoring him, Viker kept attacking relentlessly. Eventually, he focused all his strength into the hilt of his sword and thrust the blade into the center of the shield, cracking a large section right in the middle. Adolph noticed and was surprised, thinking, is he really attacking the same spot over and over? He's like a precise machine. His focus and swordsmanship deserve recognition. However, Viker's sword also suffered damage from this. When he struck the gap in the shield once more, the sword immediately broke in two. Adolph smugly remarked, "This is no different than trying to break a stone wall by throwing an egg at it. You should have assessed the strength of my wall and the durability of your sword before trying something like that." He continued, "While there's something commendable about being stubborn and attempting to break it, you really need to consider your opponent carefully before using a strategy like that." Outside, both Camas and Hugo were stunned. Adolph smiled with satisfaction and began to evaluate. "You've got talent, but you're still lacking a lot to engage to my granddaughter." Suddenly, he stopped, shocked, and gasped. Water from the ceramic vase poured down his head after being pierced by a shard of a sword. He exclaimed in surprise, "What?" Then, in a flurry, he added, "A piece of the sword has shattered my vase." Viker turned on his heel, seriously stating, "I think that's enough." He shot a playful glance at Adolph and continued, "Or should I make the drip pot smaller?" Viker's flashy demeanor stirred something in Camas's heart. She shyly raised her voice, saying, "That's just a coincidence, but he defeated my uncle, which means the marriage." Hugo nearby fell silent for a moment. Then he too felt a thrill and cracked a smile, plotting in his mind. A coincidence, really? Did the sword's piece accidentally break the vase? At that moment, Viker and Adolph locked eyes, while Hugo thought to himself, "Viker van Baskerville, I may have raised a more cunning hunting dog than I realized."